The story begins with the choice. An elder holds out a red button to the hero. Pressing it would grant 1,000,000 years of training, which sounds impossible, and the hero hesitates under the crimson moon. With a trembling hand, he pressed the button. 1,000,000 years passed. Only then did he realize he had become the strongest of all. Long ago, the hero trained hard every day. Each movement was honed. 996, strike, 997, another strike. Meet Alan Radorva, a 15-year-old in his 3rd year at the higher school of fencing. 2 boys walked by. One saw Alan and called him a loser with a sword. The other sneered that he'd never seen a worse fencer. Alan knew the academy mocked him. They called him a failure and laughed at his strength. His mother saved so much that sometimes they didn't even have enough for food. To avoid being mocked, he went to train elsewhere. His goal was to become a great swordsman and pay off his mother's debt. Giving up was not an option. A handsome young man in a luxurious suit stood before him with 2 charming companions. He smiled and felt sorry for Alan because he was wasting his strength again. The guy decided to give him a friendly piece of advice, telling him to quit fencing and choose a normal job because that would be better. Alan asked if Dorel had really come just for that and casually waved his hand to show he did not care. Dorel did not stop. He kept humiliating Alan, wondering how his parents could have raised such a useless boy who could not even hold a sword. "The apple doesn't fall far from the tree," he said, then hit him hard and called Alan's parents trash, saying he was too. From the start, he was doomed to be nothing. Alan gripped the sword hilt with both hands. His eyes flared. In a threatening voice, he demanded that the other man take back his words. There was no reply. He shouted louder that his mother was the best, and he would not let anyone insult her. Dorel smirked. He liked Alan's anger. No matter how hard Alan tried, trash would always remain trash. Laughing, he said Alan couldn't even dodge a simple blow, so he calls him that. Alan challenged Dorel. The girls nearby could not believe their ears. Dorel was stunned that a loser would challenge the school's master. Alan insisted. Dorel laughed and promised that if Alan won, Alan would drop his insults and even bow to Dorel, but if not, Alan must leave the school immediately. Dorel squinted and asked slyly whether the hero would accept such a condition. Alan opened his eyes wide, not expecting that turn. Alan accepted the challenge and its harsh terms. After saying that, he spun around and ran off. The fight was set for 9 a.m. tomorrow. That meant training harder than ever. His opponent, Dorel, is a true master of fencing. Within a year, Dorel rose to expert level and has yet to face a worthy rival. With a loud battle cry, the hero swung his sword in every direction, honing each strike. He trained so hard he did not notice it got dark. His hands were rubbed raw and bleeding, and his face showed determination. Rain started. Alan dropped to his knees, lacking strength, fell face first into the mud, pounded his fist and whispered that he wanted to win and force Dorel to take back his words. Saul and the elder appeared before him. The rain stopped suddenly, though the sky stayed gray. The elder combed his beard and gently asked if Alan had any problems. He asked what the other man thought of him. Alan said he seemed like a hermit of time. The old man smiled, pleased by the answer. Alan is a student at a top fencing school but has no talent. Everyone thinks he's a loser and doesn't believe in him. Living alone in the city, his mother supported his dream to become a master swordsman and was a wonderful person. So Alan promised to do everything to make her proud. The difference between them is too great. He's not afraid to leave school, but he couldn't live with the thought that he left without making Dorel take back the insults about his mother. The old man said he believed in Alan's strength. Alan answered sadly that he didn't know how to get stronger. The old man stood up, leaned on his staff, held a red button in his other hand, said it was time to listen, and handed it to the hero. This is the 1,000,000-year button. Press it, and the hero goes to another world to train for 1,000,000 years. No limits, only progress. Along with that, he'll get a house, a huge bathtub, and an endless supply of food. It will be a real feast. All he has to do is press a button. The old man admitted he could have had a perfect body, but chose not to, and instead offers the chance to Alan. Meanwhile, the hero was training with his sword again. He tried to ignore the old man, but the elder kept insisting. 1,000,000 years of training sounded tempting. Only once, just once. You won't regret it. Alan stopped, listened, and thought it might actually be a chance to beat Dorel. Tilting his head back, he saw no sun, but everything around was flooded with light. There was not a single shadow. It was clearly another world. He pinched himself. It hurt. A giant clock filled his vision. If the old man wasn't lying, the clock would run for 1,000,000 years. Alan decided he would endure. Alan decided that if he could train here for 1,000,000 years, he would beat Dorel, and he would make the most of every moment. A look at the clock showed a lot of time had gone by. His stomach growled. He could not ignore his hunger. Entering the house, the hero was surprised. It was bigger than it looked. He found the kitchen but did not know how to use all the appliances. A huge wardrobe caught his eye. He opened it and realized it was a magical storeroom that even had a name, Hotel Noah. It was unbelievable. One shelf has vegetables, the other has fruit. Now he's on his own and can eat whatever he likes, however much he likes. Picking up a tomato, he bit into it. The flavor pleasantly surprised him. Smiling, he began grabbing everything that looked tasty. Full, he decided it was time for a bath. While looking for the bathroom, he opened a door and found a huge pool. It was an ideal place to relax. Sinking into the water, he started to wash. His body relaxed, and he felt light and happy. After his bath, he went into the bedroom with the large bed and fell onto it. It was perfect there. Training in a place like this felt like a real gift. 10 years later, Alan began to grasp the true essence of fencing and opened his eyes to a new phase. He learned to push through fatigue and channel power from his legs into his hips, and from there into the sword. His senses sharpened. The strikes became so precise that he could hardly hear them. It all became much easier. He began to name his movements. It felt like he had created his own style. He thought of his mother and hoped she was all right. Loneliness set in. 2,000 years had passed and food no longer had any taste, like stone. After 5,000 years, he wondered whether he was really getting stronger, whether time had stopped, and whether he would forget everything when he woke. Alan! Fear gripped him. Something was wrong. He had been punishing himself for years. 7,000 years had passed. He no longer knew who he was. Quietly he trained, shouting into the void while holding the sword with both hands. He remembered people calling him a loser, but that was not true, and he knew he was not weak. They called his family trash, and him too. He must win and prove them wrong. One thought kept him going: just keep swinging the sword. That was all he could and had to do. He kept swinging. 10,000 years later, Alan discovered a new method, fighting himself with all his strength. The noise did not stop until a bound guest in the tavern reminded them that they had forgotten where they were. An endless war rekindled his love of fencing in his heart. He gave himself credit for the fight. He had grown stronger both in body and in spirit. Still, he doubted he could defeat Dorel. Dorel is a once-in-a-century genius who trained in the legendary Shigararu sword style. Among the students, Dorel is the undisputed favorite. Alan looked at his hands. Victory was impossible right now. He had no special talent. Time was a strange thing. If he focused, he could speed up the flow. He had no time to change anything. The end came suddenly. Standing silently, he realized 1,000,000 years had passed, and the numbers on the clock no longer moved. Fear gripped him, and he feared he would never find the strength. But then, everything changed, and he was back in the same place by the button, with the old man waiting for him. The moment felt strange. The elder said 1,000,000 years hadn't been wasted, but Alan felt nothing, so he was told to prove it by picking up the sword. Alan laughed. His hand reached for the weapon on its own, as if driven by an inner impulse. It felt strange. The old man laughed and said it was wonderful, and that the young swordsman had not expected it. Alan looked at his hands and asked whether it was a dream. A few broad swings and the movements are perfect. The old man laughed again and said it was as if you had been born again. The hero felt it was not enough. With moves like that, he could not beat someone who mastered the Shigararu style. His predecessor developed a deadly technique only after years of fighting and endless training. Alan had neither technique nor genius. Beating Dorel required something more. He needed a breakthrough. The old man handed him the button again. Alan could hardly believe his eyes. Grateful, he thanked him and said he would definitely find a way to win this time. He pressed the button again. A voice called to him to wake up. Alan opened one eye and muttered, "What time is it?" The voice kept demanding he get up, then rose to a shout. Alan opened his eyes in fear. He lay on the grass. He sat up suddenly and tried to remember the day, month, and year. Everything felt unreal. Shaking his head, he whispered, "I don't even know where that hermit of time is now." He had not yet seen the caregiver standing behind him. A woman came over, leaned down, said she had seen him sleep anywhere, and asked if he was all right because it looked like he had been having a nightmare. Alan smiled, scratched the back of his neck, and said he could not remember yesterday. She replied sternly that he should go back to the dorm. He stood and apologized. She added that if he did not eat breakfast, she would have to throw it away. He didn't understand anything, and everything that had happened felt like a dream. Then a button on the ground caught his eye, so he picked it up, turned it in his hands, and pressed it several times. A smile crossed his face as he decided it was probably just a dream, and he tossed the button to the ground. A woman called to him and asked what he was doing here. Alan said he was already on his way. The button lay broken in the grass. She fed him. Alan thanked her for the shower. Noticing he ate heartily today, she checked her watch, saw it was 7:50, and asked if he had any classes. The boy's eyes widened. His fight with Dorel is at 9 o'clock today. It takes almost 3 hours to walk to school. He would not make it. Alan said he had to run. The woman told him to be careful and not get hurt. He ran as fast as he could. At the entrance, he apologized and said he was late. The professor sat in the hall. His duel with Dorel Button was at 9 o'clock. After checking the papers, the professor said the man had arrived on time. There was still a lot of work to do. A full hour remained before the battle. He checked his watch. It was only 8 o'clock. Alan kept walking, not sure how he had managed to arrive on time. At the entrance, he hesitated for a moment, nervous. He gathered his strength. It was time to focus. Facing Dorel with all his training behind him, he may not win, but he will not give up. Alan stopped, gripped the sword, exhaled, and opened the door. For some reason, they greeted him without joy. Dorel stood in the center of the hall. He laughed and said he respected him for showing up rather than running away. Button replied that it wasn't his fault and that he was surprised. It seems someone told everyone. He laughed and said it was probably one of the students who told everything. She tried to humiliate him in front of everyone. The school should have stopped it. Students shouted from all sides, "Give this loser a beating. He swings his sword like a fool every day." One said that Alan should be thanked, since he only loses to the very best. Doors opened, and the professor entered the hall. The hero was surprised as the professor checked his watch and solemnly announced that it was time for the duel between Dorel Button and Alan Radorva. Alan hoped the professor would stop the fight. The professor had no intention of doing so. It seemed the school was against him too. The professor asked if they were both ready. Knowing the odds were slim, the hero started the duel, but it was too late to back down. Dorel's style was dangerous. A frontal attack would not work. Alan decided to dodge and strike the open side at the right moment. Bracing himself, he took a fighting stance. They faced each other motionless, and the hero wondered why his opponent did not attack and what he was waiting for. Suddenly, Dorel shouted his name and demanded to know what he had done. Alan did not understand. The opponent, angry, told him not to pretend and called him a scoundrel. Dorel laughed. The spectators did not understand what was happening but urged him on, calling for the first strike. Dorel steadied himself. Tightening his grip on the sword, he wound up and charged. A Shigeru-style attack, a fiery strike launched at high speed. The hero thought he wouldn't have time to dodge, but he managed at the last moment. Dorian's eyes widened. He shouted in disbelief that Alan had dodged it. It was the first time Alan had avoided his strike. "The next one will be 3 times faster," Dorel barked. "You won't get lucky this time." Using Shigeru's secret technique, Eternal Rift, he lunged forward with his arm outstretched. Alan was ready and could see every move of his opponent. The pace picked up, but he still saw everything. Steadying himself, he prepared to block the blow. "Come here." Alan raised his sword, remembered Dorel mocking others, and struck him with a powerful blow. Dorel was knocked aside and fell with a muffled groan, unable to get up after such a powerful blow. Silence filled the hall. No one could believe what they had just seen. Alan's eyes widened in surprise. He couldn't believe what he'd just done. With a single motion, he struck 7 times in a row, all that force landing on Dorel. The professor rushed to Dorel, trying to revive him. It turned out the old man, the button, and a million years of training were all real. The professor declared Dorel Button defeated. The winner was Alan Radorva. He could not believe it. A thought flashed that this might not be a dream. A few days after the fight, the situation changed. Alan kept training. People called him a fraud, but no one dared to confront him. Fear of sharing Dorel's fate spread. Rumors said he had won by cheating. Students grew harsher and provoked fights. Alan always got even. Through grueling training, he became strong and always punished those who bullied others. No one insulted him to his face anymore. People gossiped behind his back, calling him a loser, the school's disgrace, and a coward who only won by cheating. He would once have broken under that, but not now. He walked calmly through the city. Seeing a woman with a child, he thought of his mother. His heart tightened, and he missed her. The mother already knew her son would come home for the holidays. He planned to buy her gifts. Her favorite treats are senbei and sweets. Alan imagined her surprise when she saw him. He wondered how much money was in his wallet, then emptied it into his palm. There was not much. He decided he had to find work. His landlady said she knew a place where he could earn a little extra. Alan beamed and asked where it was. She started looking for the flyer and said she would, of course, help. He could earn good money there. At last, she found this postcard and showed it. Alan looked and was surprised. It was something. A woman smiled and said that everything was correct. The swordsman's tournament in the city of Orbis takes place every month. There, participants must believe in themselves. Competitors display their skills. The winner will receive a rare reward. Only a true warrior can earn it. A fencing tournament would be tough. Alan thought he could win at least a few matches. Not a bad idea, but you need 1,000 gold to register. She said angrily that he had lost his mind. She cares for the house and its people. If he has no money, she'll give it to him. She trusts him. Alan brightened and asked if she was serious. She agreed, but only in exchange for his promise to try his hardest. He promised to do everything he could. Grateful to her, he now aims to win the tournament and claim the top prize. Suddenly a tremor seized him. It all seemed like a joke. Looking at the others, he realized they all handled a sword far better than he did. He had been too naive. He decided to sign up for the tournament first. Someone suddenly shoved him from behind. He turned and apologized. A burly warrior with the killer stare stood before him. The warrior called him a brat and said this was no place to play war. One companion told the warrior, "Bobble, it's wrong to bully someone weaker." And another noticed Alan's sword and suggested he might be involved too. The third laughed and said it was hard to believe this guy would last until noon. Alan thought they were very rude. Bobble clenched his teeth, tensed, and demanded to know what the man was staring at and whether he wanted a fight. His strength looked superhuman. Alan replied calmly, "First, you pushed me." He hesitated in his head because the fight could cost him a spot in the tournament. Bubble told the girls not to talk to this loser. The hero sighed in relief because a fight had been avoided. Alan decided not to waste time and returned to registration. Alan had trouble finding the registration booth for a long time before he finally spotted a tent covered in magical symbols. The receptionist called the next person. Alan stepped forward and said, "I want to register for the swordsman's tournament." She said the participation fee was 1,000 gold. Alan handed her the money without hesitation. Thanking him, the woman asked for his name and fencing style, and he awkwardly gave his name, Alan Radorva, but could not immediately name his style. He didn't want to say it, but finally admitted it was his own style. The girl laughed and said she understood. That was his style. Alan blushed and scratched the back of his neck. After registering, he walked on thinking it was a bit awkward. Only a madman would say that out loud, so he decided not to dwell on it and focused on the tournament. He watched her go, thought she was very beautiful, and wondered whether she was also competing in the tournament. The city mayor stepped onto the stage and, in his welcome speech, said he was glad the tournament would be peaceful this time. His smile slowly changed into a predatory grin. The mayor kept shouting into the microphone, urging the crowd to witness the blinding glow of clashing swords and declaring it a war where the strongest swordsmen would meet in battle. "Heroes, show your skill in this unforgettable tournament," he called. The crowd went wild. The air crackled. Alan felt the crowd was about to swallow him. The mayor ended his speech calmly and asked the participants to move to the waiting area. Leah told the mayor not to worry so much. She had come only to watch the ruffians this time because the word seemed apt. The mayor took the hint. Leah already liked the previous champion. Leia confirmed she was interested in the previous tournament winner, Rosa Valencia, wanted to see her in person, and also hoped to find a hidden treasure among the newcomers, though she did not expect to find it. The host's voice rang out loud and clear. "Thank you all for waiting. I'm Fina Chan, your master of ceremonies." She smiled and promised to explain the tournament rules. Fights are one-on-one. Victory goes to the fighter who knocks their opponent out of the arena or renders them unable to continue. Killing is forbidden and leads to disqualification. Alan thought the rules were simple and clear. Fina put her hand into the lottery drum and said, "Now we will find out who will fight first." Then she drew the cards and announced loudly, "The first match is Bubble Domingo versus Alan Radorva." And Alan felt fear because he did not want to go first. There was nowhere to retreat. He headed for the arena. Bobble immediately recognized him. "Damn, I'll crush that kid right now," he snarled, outraged that a kid like that dared to come here. Alan also recognized the man who pushed him from behind in the square. Fina Chan said into the microphone, "My data shows Bobble uses the Congo bowl style. A single blow breaks the enemy into pieces. This ancient sword style is extremely powerful. Alan uses his own style without borrowing, and the audience was stunned, then laughed. From the crowd, "Don't let yourself get crushed, kid. Show your style before they turn you into pulp." Alan bowed to Bablu and said, "I'm ready." From the VIP box, Leia watched and noticed the boy did not give up even in this situation. Determination at that age is rare. Fina asked whether the fighters were ready, and after they confirmed, she announced that the fight would begin. Bobble lifted his sword with both hands and rushed in to attack. Alan was fully focused. After 1,000,000 years, he will find out how good he is with the sword. Alan raised his sword overhead, starting with the first move he developed in training, the flying shadow style, and their blades met. Bobble's face froze into a terrible animal expression, eyes filled with rage like a predator's. The blow hit with extraordinary force. Bobble only made a strange sound, and the fight ended. His body flew out of the arena, crashed with a thud, and did not move again. The host stood frozen. The spectators in the stands were silent. Leia's eyes went wide like plates. There was dead silence all around. Alan himself was shocked, standing with his sword lowered. He didn't even have time to understand what had happened. The girl he noticed after he registered looked at him, now a little more confident. In a cheerful voice into the microphone, she announced that Alan Radorva was the winner. No one expected that outcome. One blow brought the victory. The arena erupted in applause, and the hero could hardly believe his eyes that it was real. The blow was really that strong, but he stands here victorious, so this is not a dream. He began to believe in himself. After that, he won 5 more fights in a row. Nothing like this had been in his wildest dreams. At last, the final begins. Fina Chan opened the tournament's closing match, thanking everyone for their patience. The last match is starting. 2 finalists remained. First, Rosa Valencia, the girl Alan liked during registration. Everyone knew her as the heir to the secret Okido sword style. She had won every fight without a scratch, elegant and flawless. On the other side of the arena stood Alan Radorva, a natural who created his own style and doesn't copy any of the well-known styles. He is no longer underestimated. No one dares to mock his skill. People in the stands shouted support. "You are unique." Some asked to take him as a student, others confessed their love. Alan was at a loss. It was the first time he had heard anything like it. He needed to focus now. He bowed to his female rival and said, "It is an honor to face you in battle." He was in awe of her. Rosa was a former champion whose name everyone knew and whose victories were flawless. At his age, she was already catching dangerous criminals and handing them to the holy knights. Talented and deadly, she was also stunningly beautiful. Even with such a fragile body, she could beat anyone. So she must not be underestimated, and he had to be careful. Alan drew his sword. Rosa was already in a fighting stance. Fina Chan began commentating on the fight. "Both are sizing each other up and looking for an opening to attack," she said. Rosa attacked, but Alan dodged again, leaving her surprised at how he had done it. Spotting an opening, the hero attacked, but she dodged skillfully. A guy in the stands shouted again that he wanted to be his student. Someone else immediately said he was a fool, and that Alan had plenty to do without him. The fight continued. Rosa asked who had taught Alan to use the sword so well. Alan hesitated a little, then said he had taught himself. She could not believe it. Don't lie, your strikes show dedication and years of training. This is not a beginner's technique. You can play dumb as long as you want, but she launched an attack in Okaito style, a sharp strike called Mirisakura. Despite her grace, Rosa had not reached an ideal level, and small windows of vulnerability remained between her strikes. Surprisingly, Alan also had an 8-strike technique, and it was happening now. He used her, but in a completely different way. His plan had no weak spot. Rosa shouted that it was over. Alan gathered all his power into a single breakthrough, delivering 8 strikes in one motion with complete focus. Rosa defended in the Yatagras Tudo style, an advanced defensive technique. Amazed, she thought it was incredible and could not understand how he had done it, and Alan already knew it was over. The crowd went wild. He won. They lifted him onto their shoulders and everyone cheered. A few days after the tournament, Alan was called to the principal's office. He figured it was about rumors that he cheated in the fight with Dorel and that they wanted to punish him. Alan entered the director's office with the professor. The director smiled, thanked them for coming, and offered tea. Alan thanked him and asked why he had been called. The principal said, "This is a great honor. Our student received an invitation to a prestigious academy. Even he did not understand why they chose him, but everyone around was delighted." The professor joined in. "We believed in you from the start. At graduation, you will tell everyone about this achievement." They truly believed in him. Alan apologized and asked for some time to think about the recommendation. The director and the professor were stunned. The director said he could not believe it. The professor asked if Alan really wanted to refuse, and Alan said he had not yet decided whether to become a holy knight or a dark swordsman, and wanted time to think. First, he wants to go home to see his mother and talk to her, and only then can he answer that important question. The director and the professor tried again to persuade him, but Alan stayed firm and would not be swayed. A few days later, he was fully ready for the trip and went to say goodbye to his caregiver. She asked whether he had forgotten anything, and if he had taken the sweets they had bought together. He said he had. Alan left the house, warmed up a little before running, did some stretches, and set off. The route ran through the forest. For 3 hours he had been moving north, passing the mountains. At that pace, he should have arrived by now. He was happy to finally arrive in his native village, Goza. From the hill, the familiar houses came into view. A wave of nostalgia hit him. He walked into the village. Tajaki, the antagonist, was glad to see him. The old man joked that he had gotten taller, as if he had grown overnight. Alan laughed and called it a sudden growth. Both were happy to meet. After a short chat, Alan said goodbye to Tajaki. Tajaki said he was always happy to see him and invited him to come by if anything happened. The hero continued through the settlement to the very house where his mother lived. He paused at the door. The house looked exactly as it did when he had left it. It was as if time had stopped. Startled, Mom dropped the pot lid. She could not believe her eyes. They rushed into each other's arms. She was struck by how much he'd grown. Alan said he was a bit bigger now. She said she hadn't seen him in a long time and asked if he was all right. He confirmed, and she noted his speech sounded different, like a real adult. The dish was almost ready, and Alan decided to help. At dinner, he told his mother about the tournament and the candies he and Poro-san had bought. Wanting to share everything, he found that his mother only smiled. Alan hesitated and admitted he wanted to talk about something important. He asked if he could. She said calmly, "Of course. What happened? Are you worried about the future?" He confirmed it and told her about his doubts. Holy Knight, Dark Swordsman, or the Academy of 1,000 Swords. 3 paths to choose. She smiled and said he was worrying too much and that it would be easy, but he felt it was not for him. "Weren't you planning to join the 1,000 Swords Academy?" Mom asked with a raised eyebrow. "You can't fool your mother," she added. Since childhood, he had wanted to be a swordsman, training constantly and keeping his sword close. It had always been his. They both grew quiet and calm. She stroked his head, leaned in, and whispered, "Don't worry about me." Smiling, she said, "Now that we've discussed everything, it's time for dinner." Alan's favorite stew was set on the table. Some time passed. She suddenly froze, gripped by anxiety and seeming to recognize the voice. Meanwhile, the old man calmly slurped and shoved the spoon into his toothless mouth. Glancing over her shoulder, she saw him at the table and, with anger in her voice, said that from the start, It had seemed strange that food was disappearing, and she had thought it was her imagination. But it was him, the hermit of time. They had known each other for a long time. Alan relaxed in the bathtub and enjoyed it. A hot bath at home was the best. As he splashed in the water, he thought how quickly time was passing, and that his mother had already grown a little older. He splashed around happily, remembering how much longer he would have to study, but he would surely become a great swordsman as soon as he could. The hermit explained that Alan had hidden well, and because of her finding him was very difficult. Now everything was clear to her. She lunged at the old man without hesitation, swung to hit him from behind, and said, "How about we just leave right now?" She missed and smashed the table to pieces. The hermit muttered that he hadn't eaten anything tasty in a long time, then began to fade, dissolving into the air. His last words, "I hope we meet again." She stood amid the table's wreckage, her fist clenched. "Coward." The doors opened suddenly and Tajaki came in. He could not believe a hermit had been here. She said he had just vanished. Tajaki asked if she thought he had used that thing. It was about Alan. She confirmed it looked like Alan had indeed pressed the million-year button. Her name was Daria. Tajaki called her that. He could not understand how the hermit had found Alan, since Alan had been well hidden. It was not supposed to happen. Daria paused. They were silent. Then she supposed Alan might have been in a situation where his emotions took over. In his letters he said everything was fine and that he was enjoying himself. It seemed impossible because every sign showed the time hermit had done everything to stop them. This time she won't let him get away with it. Later, Alan left the village of Goza and returned to the Porosan Hotel. Talking with his mother made him happy, and for the first time he was not worried about school, but when he learned an interview was required to enter the academy, he felt a little lost. And at the interview he said, "I have trained for 1,000,000 years, which the professors did not understand. Yet in the end they admitted him and he said, "Thank you." Later, a letter arrived with the decision. The director said he had never heard of anyone failing the interview. Alan slowly opened the envelope, his heart racing at the thought of rejection. The letter confirmed he had been accepted. Alan was admitted to the Academy of 1,000 Swords. On Cloud 9, he remembered that a month ago people mocked him and called him a loser, but now he had gotten into the academy. Life can change in an instant. He ran to the kitchen and told Porosan that he had done it. He said he had been accepted. Porosan was surprised. Alan confirmed it and showed her the letter. Porosan took the letter, looked at it, and said it was simply incredible. She was sure his mother was happy now and felt happy herself. We must not miss this. A chance like that comes only once in a lifetime. In the evening, there will be a celebration in his honor. They will celebrate until morning. Alan bowed to her in thanks. Then he sent a letter to his mother, and Porosan arranged a small celebration. A few weeks later, Porosan saw him off and asked if he had forgotten anything. "No, I took everything," Alan said with a smile. Bowing, he said, "Living here for 3 years has been a real pleasure." She waved and said, "Don't exaggerate. This is not goodbye forever. I'm sure we'll meet again." Alan could not fully express his gratitude. When they first met, he had no money or hope. Yet she took him in, and each morning woke him, fed him, and helped him through hard times. "I cannot repay you fully, but thank you for everything," he said. Porosan began to cry and covered her eyes. "I must be getting old and sentimental, but if you get hungry, come by and I will cook whatever you want," she said. He smiled. "I will." She added, "I do not know which academy you attend, 1,000 Swords or 1,000,000 Knives, but please do not lose." And Alan winked, "I promise." Time passed and Alan finished the fencing school, becoming a student at the Academy of 1,000 Swords, his feet carrying him forward. He walked silently, trying not to think, only forward. Soon the capital Orest and the Guardians of the Earth appeared before him. Alan could hardly believe these were the Academy dorms. This is a truly big city. Getting here wasn't easy because there were too many temptations around. At last he found his room 501. Opening the door, he was surprised. The room was much larger than he had imagined. When he looked in the mirror, the emblem on his shoulder looked cool. A sword with a note lay on the bed, and he liked it a lot. This is where my new life begins, he thought. Much more excitement lies ahead. Alan walked through the huge building and noticed everyone looked like freshmen, though each was already quite strong. and he heard 3 girls talking. One asked if she had heard that this time 3 people got in here by recommendation. Another added that they had not even gone through the awful entrance exams. And the third laughed that the main thing was that they were here. Alan decided it was better not to say he was one of the 3, because it would bring back the tense atmosphere of Konjutsu Academy. He refused to go back to those dark times. He needed to train and make friends. This time he just wanted to live a normal student life. Better not to stand out at the ceremony. Alan hoped there would be only a few people there. Alan froze when he arrived at the ceremony. So many people had shown up. It did not look like a modest beginning. Leia stood on stage and gave a formal speech as the Academy president. Now I will introduce 3 students admitted by recommendation: Leia Vesteria, Rosa Valencia, and Alan Radorva. Please come to the stage. Alan clutched his head and thought, that's it. The end. Game over. Only a few minutes into the ceremony, his dream of a peaceful student life was already ruined, and he thought about hiding in the crowd, but Leia waved to him from the stage. He sighed, kept his head down, and walked toward the stage. There was nowhere left to go. He looked up and saw Rosa Valencia standing in front of him. She waved warmly and said they had not seen each other in a long time. Alan was surprised and asked, "What are you doing here?" She joked, "I just decided to follow you." "No, I'm just joking," she said with a smile. "The ceremony is still going on. We'll talk afterwards." Participants were asked to say their name and academy, and to add a short personal comment at the end. Leia stepped forward first and joyfully greeted everyone present. "I am Leia Vesteria. I studied abroad in the kingdom of Vesteria, and my style is absolute rule." Though born into royalty, she remained an ordinary student and genuinely wanted to befriend everyone. Alan realized she was the princess of the neighboring kingdom. Even Rosa was surprised, and Leia's confidence had true royal dignity. Whispers spread across the front row. "This is the same Leia who awakened her spiritual power at 5, one girl said. "They call her the Princess of White and Black," another added. A boy whispered dreamily, "I wish I could be in her class." "Forget it. They got in by recommendation. They're on another level," his friend replied. The president announced the next speaker, Rosa Valencia. She stepped forward, introduced herself, named her style Octo, and briefly said, "Please take care of me." Short and to the point. In the hall, a boy whispered in disbelief that Rosa Valencia was a bounty hunter and a Sengen Academy graduate with a dark past, and he wanted to see her style for himself. Meanwhile, Rosa finished, and it was Alan's turn. Taking the microphone, he felt there was nothing to say after a performance like that. He wanted to just run away, but it was too late. Silence fell in the hall. One of the boys cried in surprise, asking if it was him. The professor stepped up to the microphone and announced that the opening ceremony was over. The president walked up to the 3 newcomers and said, "That would be too simple. There is one more thing. I have high hopes for all of you." Alan stopped listening to the speech, turned sharply, and ran. Everyone looked around, surprised and unsure what had happened to him. He ran straight into the nearby woods. He felt the president had made a fool of him in front of everyone. It hurt. Meanwhile, other students were meeting and talking about the ceremony. Alan felt alone. Things that usually made him happy felt dull today. Night was falling and the air turned cool. It was probably time to head back. He was sweating from nerves. A bath was just what he needed. Finding a public bathhouse, he went inside. A long corridor led to the men's changing room. It struck him that the whole building was just for bathing. It had been a terrible day. He needed to wash all that stress away. He apologized and immediately hid behind the door. A thought flashed through his mind. Leia in the men's locker room. Leia peeked out from behind the door and laughed, announcing she was challenging you to a duel. A little flustered, Alan asked what the terms were. Clenching her fist, she said sternly that he must say whether he accepted, and he raised both hands, apparently agreeing. Leia, the Academy's president herself, suddenly appeared and said she had heard everything. Leia practically dragged them into carrying out the plan. She urged them to start because it would already be too late. The president officially announced the start of the match between Leia Vesteria and Alan Radorva. Elaine asked if this was his soul form and smiled, saying he was a good boy. "Stop standing there and show your soul form now," she said sternly. Alan apologized. "I'm sorry, but I can't do that." She asked again whether he was serious, and he confirmed. The president snorted in disappointment and walked away. Leia burst out laughing. Alan thought the princess had the widest emotional range, and he had never wanted this duel from the start. You can no longer stay silent when people underestimate you so much. The first sword style is Flying Shadow. Leia was surprised, but instantly used the white scales technique. Using the 8th sword style, he faced her Yatagarasu technique. The burst of black flames was incredible. With one powerful strike, she burned all 8 of his slashes. Her black flame was utterly terrifying. Alan moved to close the gap and rushed forward to reach her. Leia shouted for him to stay back and summoned a dragon roar, raising a storm around her. Alan said he had no idea what it was about, because he had made it all up. She realized then that this was how he had won her approval. His persistence and years of training were obvious. Leia finally acknowledged him as a worthy opponent. Alan thanked her for the honor. The girl did not stop, saying that skill in combat without a mental form is meaningless, and she promised to prove it right away. She lunged forward in the Supreme King style and landed a crushing blow. Leia let out a battle cry and struck with all her strength. Alan was thrown to the side, barely staying on his feet. The force was unpleasantly strong. Leia, slightly annoyed, admitted that he probably outmatches her at handling the ball, but he doesn't know what he's missing. She believed her sword, strengthened by a soul form, could not be defeated by mere improvisation, while Alan silently analyzed. Leia relied too much on her form, he realized. Her strikes had become predictable, and her confidence was a weakness. If he guessed the moment, he could strike precisely. The second sword style, Eclipsed Moon, caught Leia off guard, and she fell before she could understand what happened. Alan Rotorua was declared the winner. The president said that, as expected, his strength deserves respect. Alan was surprised to see Leia's strength. She had only just fainted and would soon wake up. Leia sat down slowly and asked what had happened. The president said that, unfortunately, you lost. It was a real match. Leia immediately burst into questions. What was that? Why did I lose? What did you do to me? How? Alan explained calmly that he had predicted where she would appear and struck there. The cuts made in space were not completely invisible. She would have seen them if she had looked closely. The princess cut off Alan's explanation, not interested in the method and calling it unfair. Leia stepped in, saying the duel was over and Alan had won. What will the princess do now? Surprised, she asked what going to do meant. Leia hesitated and then suddenly remembered. The vanquished becomes the victor's slave. Leia began to panic, searching for a way to avoid the promise. The president noted the fight was unofficial, so the result could be kept quiet if neither side objected. Alan sighed with relief. Making a princess from another country a slave was not a good idea. The president asked the princess directly if she was truly ready to accept it. The silence dragged on. Everyone saw that Leia Sensei had an intriguing nature. The president continued that if Leia had not gotten involved in the fight, she could have lived as before. But Leia does not seek easy paths. Annoyed, Leia finally said she understood. A promise is a promise, she will keep it. She asked not to be talked about as if she had been forced, and will decide for herself whether to keep her promise or to run away. The decision must be hers. The president led them to Leia's room, then cheerfully announced, "Slaves must devote themselves completely to their master," and said she would bring Alan's things tomorrow. Alan couldn't help thinking that the princess abroad had become a stranger's slave and worried about what would happen back home if people found out. The president closed the door with a smile. It amused her to watch Leia realize the consequences of her decisions. The 3 recommended students were real talents, she thought, and she planned to have them represent the academy at the Festival of 5 Saints. But let's go back to the events that happened a little earlier. The same happened in the fight with Dorel. Defeat fulfilled the promise. That is why the present situation cannot be changed. Alan understood that even if he wanted to break the slave contract, Leia would not accept it. The only way was to defeat him in a new fight. He grew pensive. Meanwhile, Leia sat on the floor, head lowered, and stayed silent. Her uniform was torn. Alan thought that if he glanced up a little, he would see a real Eden. Lost in thought, he did not notice it at first. Leia seemed unaware as well. She now had to find a way to tell her. Scanning the room, he found it cozy, filled with soft toys and a pleasant scent, nothing like what he had imagined for a princess. The room was spacious and filled with a soft scent, but the girl suddenly asked him not to stare because she felt awkward. Alan apologized. He almost missed his chance. But now they are starting to understand each other better, and he will not let it slip away. He explained that his attack had torn the front of her clothes and handed her something so she could cover herself. Alan suggested dropping the formal address, but Leia, holding her jacket close, objected, saying she was a slave and had to address her master with respect. Despite her rank, she remained a swordswoman with her own will and honor. Turning back was already too late. She had given her word. She also carried a warrior's pride. Alan decided he wanted to mend things with Leia. Leia might even teach him to summon a spirit garment. With no choice, he agreed to play by her rules in the imperative form, and now officially forbids being addressed formally. Leia bristled at the idea and wondered if this was normal. But Alan explained that a master's privilege is to force a slave to do what the master dislikes, and she understood and agreed while asking him to confirm he truly wanted that kind of interaction. A change of heart might still happen, but he won't take his words back. She also asked not to be addressed formally, because it seemed strange to her. Alan agreed to call her what she wanted. It felt like a weight had lifted. He had just arrived, and already so much nonsense had happened. Leia decided to find out who was to blame. He thought the answer was obvious, but it was not. So Alan asked directly whether she had even a slight suspicion that something was wrong when she changed in the men's locker room. Leia replied confidently that it had been the women's locker room, but now she began to doubt. Alan thought this girl clearly had problems with her head. They both sighed at the same time. A new argument started about who was copying whom. It was already 11 o'clock. Alan admitted it was really late. Leia decided to go to bed because tomorrow will be a hard day. Alan said she should wash up first. Her cheeks flushed, and the twisted phrasing made her bristle. Alan didn't understand what the problem was, but it no longer mattered. Leia stood up, went to the bathroom, and, before closing the door, warned him she would not forgive him if he peeked again. He ran off in panic. They sat in silence. Leia said it was strange that they'd left their rooms at the same time. Alan smiled and agreed. Leia offered the bottle and asked if he wanted some water. He thanked her. They were drinking side by side when she suddenly noticed he was standing too close. Alan looked at the clock. It was midnight. He said he was almost asleep, and she wondered if he really meant already. It was hard to believe this was her first time, and Alan seemed to read her mind. He assured her that nothing bad would happen, that he would sleep on the floor, so she did not need to worry. Shocked, she asked whether he really had no plans, and he shrugged, saying he had already washed up and brushed his teeth. Leia sat on the bed and calmly asked if he wanted to sleep together. Alan flinched, unsure if he'd heard it right. Still, he lay down beside her and asked shyly if he should turn the light off. Leia nodded. She lay there for a long time, unable to believe he had done nothing. Finally, she stood up, sat down, and pinched his cheek. Alan did not respond, fell asleep as if switched off, and looked completely defenseless. She pulled his cheeks to see if he was pretending. There was still no reaction. It seemed funny. Laughing, she decided to leave him alone. He was lucky today. Facing him, she realized he was not bad, a strong swordsman with serious intentions and a surprisingly gentle side. These thoughts slowly faded into tiredness. It's time to sleep. That morning they walked to school together. Leia talked about a traditional dish from her country, ramzak. She said it was very tasty. Alan became interested and said he would like to try it. Leia promised to cook. There was a shop nearby with all the ingredients. Alan walked beside her and thought that even though he expected some nighttime trouble, he slept as peacefully as a child. He thanked her, saying he was looking forward to it, and she replied confidently, "You can count on me." A girl in the classroom greeted them, addressed Leia-san, and said today was a wonderful day. Nearby, 3 students were talking about a strange creature in the woods, a woman the size of a bear. One doubted it, another agreed, and the third called it fantasy. Alan approached and greeted them politely. They gave him a cold look and ignored him, returning to their conversation. Alan looked embarrassed. The formal introductions probably made everyone treat him with caution. Then Leia approached the same boys, greeted them, and asked to talk for a bit. Their expressions changed immediately. Of course, is something wrong, Leia-san?" Alan noticed the sudden friendliness. Leia's reason for stepping in was unclear. She said she noticed Alan say hello, but they didn't reply. Maybe they were too busy. They hesitated and admitted it was not that. It was just hard to explain. His voice was barely audible. Leia smiled, called them real scoundrels, and said such behavior disgusted her. Ashamed, the boys fell silent. She wished them a good day and sat beside Alan. Alan apologized, looking guilty. Leia was genuinely surprised that he was apologizing. Watching him be ignored left her unable to stay calm. She said it was not worth worrying about people like that. Alan smiled and promised he would not do it again. Meanwhile, in class, one girl whispered to another, asking why Leia was sitting at the back with that boy, and the other just shrugged. Rosa walked into the classroom, sleepy and lazy, yawning widely as if she had just woken up. Glancing across the classroom, she immediately spotted Alan and Leia and walked over to them. Rosa sat down in front of them and greeted the main character and the girl beside him. Alan replied, and Leia asked warily what it all meant. With a smile, Rosa said everything was fine and there was no need to worry. Alan wondered if it was normal for the school principal to also teach, and if she had enough time for everything. The principal broke the silence and said it was time to start the lesson. Although it was too soon to talk about it, she had an important announcement about the Sacred Festival. The Sacred Festival is a competition for newcomers, where the school selects 3 first-year students to represent the academy in matches against other schools. For students, this is a chance to become famous and move one step closer to their dream of becoming a great swordsman. Alan realized now why everyone was so anxious. The director continued. Participants are usually chosen through a series of practical tests, but this year it's different. The choice has already been made. Representing the academy this time are Leia Vestaria, Rosa Valencia, and Alan Rodarua. Alan grabbed his head. He had almost seen it coming. But before the principal finished speaking, a boy jumped up and said, "No!" The director raised an eyebrow and asked, "What's the matter, Tessa Vermont?" "I understand why you chose Leia and Rosa. They are skilled and experienced sword fighters." This choice made no sense. Alan was nobody, and I did not know his abilities, and he grew embarrassed as Tessa looked at him with anger. Leia leaned forward in surprise and said, "You think only strength matters." 2 other boys rose to support Tessa, and Tessa went on, "He is stronger than us." Alan sat quietly, not understanding why they were humiliating him and wondering if it was worth feeling sad. Leia looked at him with pity, about to cry, and asked how he felt. Alan said he was fine, but the director called his name, and he asked in surprise what had happened. She rolled her eyes, called him hopeless, and asked who was to blame, and Alan sighed, knowing getting angry was pointless and admitting that, though scared, things had turned out that way. The director was surprised and said she hadn't expected you to take insults so calmly, and Alan quietly said it was enough for him. Standing, he moved closer and told the director quietly that it would be better to choose someone else. He didn't care and didn't want to take part in the festival. She put her hand on his shoulder, thanked him for his honesty, and stepped into the classroom saying, "I accept Alan's decision. He will not participate." The boy lowered his head. It seemed she had planned it all in advance. Alan was shocked. The principal set him up. The 3 boys perked up, and one shouted that Alan calls all the shots. Another objected, asking who he had called failures, and the third shouted louder than anyone that if he wanted to die, he would help him. Alan tried to calm them, insisting he had not said that. The director stepped in and told him that if he was a swordsman, he should go to the training ground. Alan was angry, while the director simply winked. The whole class headed to the playground. Alan was silent. He hadn't expected to be here a second time in 2 days. Tessa drew her sword and sneered that she would smash the pathetic newcomer. Alan focused. He needed to take them on one at a time. He figured handling this equipment would be easy. Alan still easily parried the blow and knocked Tessa off her feet. He declared the match over and hoped they would at least give him some recognition after that. The director stepped in again and called it unfair. The fight was supposed to be 1 against 3. The director declared the fight invalid. Alan did not understand which side she was on. 3 boys closed in on Alan and prepared to attack. He saw their tactic. 1 distracts in front, 2 attack from behind, and he wondered why this was happening to him. He only wanted a quiet school life. Fate does not always cooperate. Start with the person in front of him and deal with each one in turn. He launched an attack using the 8th Yatagarasu style, and in response heard Cloud style, then Feather style. Alan landed a powerful blow. The opponent was knocked aside, and Alan won. Next up was Tessa. Shouting at Alan not to get cocky, he rushed in. Alan's strike was stronger, and Tess was knocked aside. The third opponent stayed standing, moved up behind them, and attacked. He used the moonlight technique in the new moon style when Leah screamed unexpectedly. The opponent didn't even realize what happened when Alan used the second sword and the misty moon. The third opponent was defeated too. Leah recognized the same move Alan had used to beat her. The audience was thrilled, asking how he did it, and to be shown how to do 8 hits in a row. They congratulated him on a brilliant victory. Alan thanked them. Leah praised him, and Rose asked what magic trick he used to make that invisible cut. Alan thanked her, clarified that she meant mist moon, and explained how it all worked. Rose said the technique was really interesting, and Leah said it looked like a scam. Alan replied that it was actually very convenient. Meanwhile, the defeated began to regain consciousness. Alan approached Tessa and asked if he was all right. All three slowly stood up. Alan was surprised when the second boy bowed, apologized, and admitted he had underestimated him, saying Alan deserved to represent the academy, and the third suggested they start over. Alan smiled kindly and told them not to worry. Students go through harsh training to get here, and he had suddenly been chosen for the sacred festival, so he had not betrayed anyone. One boy said he had lost not only the fight, but also his kindness. The second agreed. Tessa concluded that now, with everything behind them, he wanted to be friends with Alan. Alan said he would be happy. Everyone reached out, stacked their hands, and shook. The director stepped in and asked if anyone else objected to Alan taking part in the Academy Festival. Alan angrily stopped her and demanded to know why she spoke as if others had complaints. Tessa calmed him and said, "Everyone now agrees he is worthy." Another boy explained that the Academy divides students into classes. Alan stood among the others, rubbing his cold hands, and said the uniform was too light for the morning. Everyone was in t-shirts and shorts. Someone sighed that April mornings were the worst. One boy winked and pointed at the door as girls came out onto the courtyard. They complained about the cold, and one frail girl could hardly stand. Girls wore t-shirts and tight track pants that hugged their figures. The boy explained it was the Academy's tradition. Most of the girls, however, could not stand it. 2 boys folded their hands in prayer and whispered, "Thank you, Academy tradition." Alan greeted Leah, who smiled and asked him how he liked the show. Trying not to look at her, he pretended to be deep in thought, but her gaze made him flustered and he could not look away. Remembering Pora-san's advice that if a girl asks about her looks, you should say it looks great on her, he told Leah, and she lit up and thanked him. Then Leah went to the others, leaving the hero with a strange feeling. He wondered why she had asked that and then was called again. He turned and saw Rosa. He asked what was wrong, and she asked how he thought she looked. This time he didn't hesitate and said it really suited her. Rosa smiled gratefully and joined the girls. Confusion washed over him. It looked like some kind of ritual. Suddenly, the academy director appeared. Her voice boomed louder than the instructor's whistle, so she didn't need it. She announced that a trial would be held today. Beginners may not use their own styles, so their real skill can be judged. The test has 3 parts. A standard cut, 10 strikes, and a continuous attack. If that is clear, we will start with the cut. If you don't know, stand in front of the bamboo, take a stance, then quickly draw the sword and cut it in half. Time is recorded. This man will evaluate the results. With 50 years of experience, treat him with respect. The average time for first-year students is 0.8 seconds. Without a word, she approached the bamboo, drew her sword, and cut it with 1 precise stroke. A man announced half a second with joy. It was a great result. Leah was pleased. The director praised her and called it a successful start. Next is Rosa Valencia. Using the lightning Sakura technique, she impressed even the judge, who called it stunning. 0.3 seconds passed. Rosa beamed, certain she had won. Leah snorted and pouted. Alan smiled, and they seemed to get along well. The director noted it was impressive, as expected from one-handed sword technique. Next, Alan Rotorua needs only to make a simple cut. This used to be his weakest point, but after millennia of training he is about to show what he can do. He approached the bamboo, swung and hit it, but the stalk did not fall. Everyone froze, and the judge recorded nothing. The audience fell silent, unsure what was going on. The judge sat without taking his eyes off Alan. The hero asked, confused, what had happened. The man frowned. Alan asked again how many seconds had passed. No one answered. He stepped closer and the director leaned in. Then the judge grew visibly emotional. The judge shouted angrily that the claim was false and that Alan did not even cut the bamboo. The contestant could not accept that and insisted he had split it, then walked over and touched the bamboo. The top of the bamboo finally fell. The man leapt up in disbelief. Classmates whispered that no one had seen the strike. No one knew when he had drawn his sword. Alarmed, the director realized that if an expert with 50 years of experience did not notice the hit, that was a problem. She asked Alan to repeat it more slowly. The hero agreed, even though he never expected anyone to ask him to slow his machine at a race that tests speed. The director finally announced the test was over and praised everyone for their effort. Leah said the training hall would be open all day. Alan looked at his results with interest and noticed he'd grown a lot. Then, as he was about to leave, a classmate stopped him. A guy asked whether Alan's technique during the 10 strikes is called flying shadow, or something like that. Alan confirmed and asked why he was asking. A student asked to learn the technique and offered his own style, splitting iron, in return, but Alan refused, saying he was not worthy to be a mentor. The boy begged, even calling him sensei and asking for a quick demonstration. Alan hesitated, scratched the back of his head and agreed. The boy lit up, and the others ran over too. Someone suggested an exchange for the new moon style. Others joined too, including the girls. Leah and Rosa wanted to learn as well. The stream of volunteers kept growing. Alan urged everyone to calm down and promised to try to teach anyone who wanted to learn. Then everyone eagerly shared their techniques and practiced together, laughing and helping each other. Alan realized he had always dreamed of a day like this, where swords and friendship come together in training without rivalry. Tears filled his eyes, but he rushed to say it was not tears, just something in his eye. Someone asked where to begin. The hero smiled and said, "Raise your sword." The next day was a day off, so Alan decided it was the perfect chance for a full day of training. Leah suddenly turned to him and asked if he was free today. He hesitated. When he fell silent, she apologized and asked if he was busy. Alan hesitated because training mattered, and so did his friends. He remembered Leah had mentioned a great nearby restaurant that serves ramzak, and when she suggested they have lunch together, he did not object. They walked down the street. Leah said the weather was beautiful today. Alan agreed that it was a perfect day for training. She frowned at what he'd said. Alan denied it, saying she'd imagined the training. Fencing hadn't been on his mind at all as he walked beside her. Alan peered around the corner and asked if there really was a passage here. Leah replied confidently that she had been here many times. Rosa suddenly appeared on the road and stopped, surprised to see Alan and Leah together. The hero explained they were going to eat ramzak. Rosa didn't know what it was. Alan said it was a traditional Vesturian dish and invited her to join. She agreed right away. Leah started to object, but Alan cut her off and said it was time to go. The waiter asked if they were ready to order. Leah ordered a ramzak assortment and again said it was the tastiest here. Rosa was surprised, and Alan said he could not wait. Within 10 minutes, the waiter apologized for the wait and brought a huge plate piled with fragrant ramzak. Leah said it looked simply wonderful, Alan pointed out. There is really a lot of it, but the smell is incredible, and Rosa agreed the scent whets the appetite. Suggesting they start while the dish was hot, Leah wished everyone a good meal. Rosa replied politely and joined the wish. They dug in greedily. Alan said it was very tasty. Glad she'd warned them, Leah smiled. Rosa agreed, and Leah added it was a popular dish from her homeland. Alan said he could not even imagine how tasty it was. Rosa confirmed his words again. 30 minutes passed. Leah said it felt like true nostalgia. Alan barely held back and decided to leave the rest to her. At that moment, his eyes met Rosa's. The hero wondered why it felt so odd. Rosa then told him to stop adding the respectful title. He agreed and said, "Fine, Rosa-san." Angry, she insisted on no-san. He replied, "Fine, Rosa." Rosa brightened, which was better, while Leah finished the last bites. After thanking them for the food, she stood and said they had to move on. They asked the others to wait a bit because they had overeaten, but Leah had already rushed ahead and kept going. After a hearty ramzak, they strolled through the aquarium, pastry shops, department stores, and many other places. They ended up in the city's most famous jewelry store. The girls tried on the jewelry one by one and asked Alan if it suited them. He said it looked amazing and warned them not to drop any piece. Their financial clout was intimidating. If he broke something by accident, he would face debts, expulsion from the academy, the need to find work, and would not even be able to look his mother in the eye. Alan sat on the bench, sighed deeply, and apologized to the girls, saying he was a bit tired and wanted to rest. Leah checked if everything was all right, and Rosa asked what had happened. Alan said he was fine. "I'm just a bit dizzy." I asked them not to worry and to enjoy the decorations. One agreed, the other warned that if anything goes wrong, she should say so right away. The girls stepped aside to talk. Leah asked Rosa how many months she needed and whether 3 was the standard. Rosa said yes, but what mattered most was the feeling. Alan sat and wondered what they were talking about. Armed men in masks suddenly stormed into the shop. They shouted for everyone to stay still and immediately raised their hands. One of the robbers ordered the shopkeeper to put all the jewels into a bag. She begged him to spare her, but he struck her on the back with his sword. After that, the guys couldn't hold back and immediately rushed into the fight. One of the criminals, panicking, asked who they were. It was already too late. Each fighter used their own fencing style, and the robbers didn't even react. Rosa said confidently they'd handle it, and Alan added it would be no problem, deciding not to let one of the attackers get away. The enemy remained in range. Alan used the first style, Shadow Strike. A lightning-fast move knocked the attacker off his feet. He was immediately detained. The next morning, someone at the academy told Alan they had caused a real stir the day before. Alan asked what they meant. A classmate held up a newspaper. Rosa and Leah appear full length while Alan is in the background. Alan looks small in the photo, but the important thing is they know the truth, and Rosa said even a small success is a success. The article described the director, who does daily work that would make others faint, yet she remains calm and confident in front of the students. Leah introduced the man as number 18, her servant, and the students were puzzled that he had a number instead of a name. The principal warned everyone to be careful. His sentence was 100 years of hard labor. Leah asked angrily why the teacher had brought a prisoner. It turned out this man had a weakness for women's bodies and profited from it by working at academies across the country. The girls stared at each other in disgust. It was sickening. He was the enemy of all women. The sentence for spying and prison escapes kept rising until it reached 100 years, and Alan understood everything. But Leah remained uneasy, wondering why such a dangerous man was still free. Leah answered that he was under control. Obedient because he knew the rules, he stayed in line. Suddenly, someone shouted that she was the greatest. The director noted it was time to move on to the main point and added that newcomers probably do not know the Academy's history. Once the Academy of 1,000 Blades was the best, while the Ice Academy always came in second, especially at the Sacred Festival of the Five. That era was called the Golden Age. Times changed. Due to various problems, both academies lost their former glory and fell into decline. The public and the media only made the situation worse by turning against them. Their school lost to the Ice Academy and is now last in every tournament. Once a worthy rival, this academy no longer competes as an equal and now only casts a shadow over its past. The director barely held back her anger. This was unforgivable. The Ice Academy must be destroyed. The prisoner muttered, "We cannot lose to these scoundrels." Last night she put together the strongest team without even blinking. The director showed the team. Alan, Leah, and Rosa. The hero understood why she was so tense. Her plan was risky but logical, and his role was to analyze enemy styles, tactics, and behavior, and win. Leah was surprised that Alan had been put in the vanguard instead of being the leader. Rosa agreed, but the director sighed and hinted the reason was important. Rosa knew that if they wanted a real victory, Alan had to act first. Leah laughed darkly. The opponents won't guess that their strongest card is in the first line. The girls backed the idea enthusiastically, and Alan thought it would frighten rivals and create the impression of strength, but he quickly held himself back because he must beat the Elite Academy's freshmen 3 times in a row. Even a single victory would be an achievement, and they clearly overrated him. Dremley already pictured her rivals shaking with fear after 3 straight losses. It was Valentine's Day and also the Sacred Festival. When Leah saw the list of participants, she was shocked. The opponents had no vanguard, and their center was fragile as a reed. Everyone was outraged. Alan also grew angry at the idea that two fighters could be enough against the fallen academy of 1,000 blades. Leah wanted to change the lineup, only shuffled the roles a little, but the secretary apologized and said rules are rules, so changes are not allowed. The hero understood the teacher's anger. But people who can't control themselves always blame others. The sensei couldn't answer because Ferris came in and greeted Leah, saying they had not seen each other for a long time. It was the director of the Ice Academy. The meeting came as an unpleasant surprise. Annoyed, the teacher asked what she had done. She would never have thought the other woman could be so mean. Ferris replied that it was not meanness, but a smart approach. She turned to one of the guards and asked him to confirm her words. The guard confirmed her words without hesitation. The girls clashed again. Leah shouted that her rival had not changed, as if she had forgotten their string of defeats. But Ferris countered that their academy had long been ahead. Insults were exchanged, and it nearly came to blows. The quarrel flared up with renewed intensity. The hero watched it all silently and thought that if these are the academy directors, the country faces a troubling future. Leah shouted again that today she would restore the academy of 1,000 blades to its former glory. Ferris replied that it's easy to say, but soon she'll be the one crying. Both suddenly calmed down and returned to their teams as if nothing had happened. Alan started to tremble. He didn't understand what was happening. Suddenly, he felt a murderous intent bearing down on him. It was Sid Euclius, one of the rivals. The hero immediately realized this academy would be a challenge. At last, the tournament host thanked everyone for their patience. The first match between the two famed academies was announced solemnly, and Alan felt something shift inside him. His fans shouted, cheering with all their strength and urging him to press on and not lose to those worthless opponents. A quiet, touched smile crossed his face. Things were no longer the same. He was not alone and had to win for all of them. Alan walked out of the East Gate. The crowd warmly welcomed their hero. The opponent told him that today they would fight like true swordsmen, and even the gods would see their shame. The hero agreed. Still cautious after Leah spoke, he found the opponent polite. The commentator announced the start of the fight. The opponent immediately summoned a strangely shaped sword that appeared in his hands, born from a hellish entity. Alan recognized the weapon. It was the very same infernal creation. The enemy rushed forward. The hero quickly sized him up, fast, but with steps that were too obvious. That open move was a perfect chance to counterattack. Suddenly something went wrong. No one understood what happened. Alan fell to the ground. The crowd whispered. People around asked what he was doing. The opponent shouted happily goodbye to the foolish swordsman. A countdown appeared before his eyes. 99 years, 12 months, 31 days, 23 hours, 59 minutes, 42 seconds. Alan remembered he had been wounded by an enemy. Tagonist surveyed the area. It looked exactly as it had 100 million years ago. It might be a world created by Cain's spirit weapon, so he had to test how it worked. Seeing the number 99 years, he figured the Hermit of Time had given him exactly 100. But first, a little training. The announcer on the screen said the opponent fell to Cain's deadly blow as expected. They should finish him off, but it may be best to end the match now. At that moment, Alan sprang up and told them to stop, saying he was alive and ready to continue, and that the match had not yet started. The judge was stunned. It was hard to believe. Alan said he didn't understand it either, but he could keep fighting. Even his opponent could not believe he was alive. Yet Alan immediately used the Sakura technique, a one-handed style with a mirror strike. The enemy raged, and the hellish weapon was meant to lock Alan away for 100 years, yet his spirit remains unbroken. Alan landed the final blow and said, 100 years is not that long. Then the commentator ran to the fallen Cain and said he could no longer fight. The winner of the fight is Alan, and the whole team is thrilled as Leah called out. The director praised him for handling it well, but said he should stay away from spiritual weapons from now on. Rosa asked in surprise when he had learned her technique. Alan explained that while trapped in the spirit world, he trained for 100 years, mastering the skills he learned in class and even copying Sakura's style by watching her. Amazed, she saw that what had taken her years he had remembered and recreated. Alan said his version was different, merging hers with his own Yatagarasu technique. She noted his version was even sharper. It was no surprise it was more effective. Alan blushed and offered to teach her that style. Rosa smiled and agreed at once. At that moment, the commentator apologized for the delay and announced the start of the second fight. The judge announced the vanguard of the Academy of 1,000 Blades, Alan Radaruya, emerging from the western gate. Now, the representative of the Ice Academy comes from the east. The commentator continued. Ice Academy did not register avant-garde, so this is their last fighter. If Alan wins, they will lose first place for the first time in 10 years. Both are self-taught. The judge expected a spectacular and unusual fight, especially between two self-taught fighters, which is rare these days. But then something unexpected happened. A blade crashed into his window. Sid grew irritated and thought he had missed again. The jerk was even laughing at him. Alan remembered the man's face and needed to be more careful at night, but still did not know who he was. In the end, he threw the knife, intending to kill the commentator. That level of accuracy and force from that distance made it clear this was not an ordinary person. The judge gathered himself and announced the second fight was about to begin, then told everyone to be ready. Alan looked at his opponent. His opponent just stood there, waiting for him to attack first. All right then, this may be another spiritual technique. If so, we'll have to strike first again. Using the same technique, he struck, but the enemy blocked the blow without moving. Alan decided Sid was only mocking him. During the attack, he barely noticed his sword move. The enemy called him a fool. Sid charged forward, but Alan skillfully parried every blow. The hero saw the opponent's reaction slow with each passing second. Sid used his superhuman strength, cutting through everything in his path without limits. The one thing missing was a sincere, genuine drive worthy of fencing. Alan decided he would not lose to anyone in that. His gaze slid down, then landed on the enemy again. Sid grunted and asked what was wrong with his face. Let him accept it. Mediocrity will never defeat genius. But Alan replied that Sid was a genius, and he would be the one to win. Alan used the clouds and dark sky styles to attack, while his opponent hurled insults at him. I added the Okido and Sakura Bloom techniques and noticed Sid lose his balance. Alan's mirror strike wasn't enough, so he activated the 8th sword and switched to Yatagarasu style. They paused the fight for a moment. Alan admitted that Sid really was incredible. Sid replied that Alan also had a lot of talent. He added he only has talent and that it is enough. His fencing is far superior. He shouted at Alan to shut up, saying all the effort and training were just nonsense that only showed how disgusting Alan was. No matter how hard he tries, trash will always be trash. Now he will show how pitiful effort looks next to talent. Suddenly, he admitted out loud that it was getting more interesting. Laughing, Sid confirmed that he had noticed everything correctly. Sid threw an ice spear at Alan, but Alan quickly dodged it. The attack's power stunned him. He had never seen such force. The opponent sneered, asked why he was staring, then struck again with an ice weapon. Alan realized that stopping for a second would be enough, and it would be the end. Dodging and stepping back, he made Sid even angrier. Alan was in trouble. After Sid activated the cold weapon, he became incredibly fast. Alan needed to think faster. He asked his opponent what it meant. The man told him to look at his hands. Alan looked and was alarmed to see his skin had turned blue. It hit him. Sid had caught him. The situation became critical. His opponent taunted him, saying he had reached his limit. Then he said, "Let me help," and began hitting even harder, again and again. It had gone too far. He got carried away and lost control. A roar rose from the crowd and Alan's friends shouted. Sid turned to them and said he would not let him suffer. He would just cut him down. He raised his sword for an icy blow and the friends screamed in terror. At that moment, Alan grabbed the sword blade with his bare hand. He could not move and was about to die just like that. He didn't want to die, didn't want to accept defeat. Bitterly, he whispered, as always, "I lose." Sid swung once more, but Alan held his sword steady. The opponent shouted that he had finally woken. It felt like 100,000 billion years had passed. Alan's allies sighed with relief, though they did not understand what was happening. The director thought he had finally appeared. Sid kept taunting, saying, "You have so much power but no use, no talent at all, just a spiritual core. I won't make a spectacle of myself for someone who will soon be just a wet spot." Alan said he did not care who he was. It made no difference. Sid got furious at being spoken to like that. Sid activated the ice spear again and readied himself for another attack on Alan. Friends in the stands shouted for Alan to run and dodge, while Sid just sighed because he was bored. At that moment, Alan began to change. His body shifted into a slender figure with long hair. He looked at his opponent and wondered what had happened to his face. That man really thought his dolls would scare him. Then Alan spotted an old hermit in the commentator's booth. That damned old man. His body looks like a skeleton and he keeps making fun of him. But if he finds him, he will not like it. As the sword nearly touched Alan, he turned, grabbed the blade and said coldly not to assume he was distracted. "Everything is under control." He felt pity for Sid, and could not find words because the opponent seemed so pitiful, so Alan let go of his sword and pushed him away. The first enemy after my rebirth was such a fool, but it didn't matter anymore. I had to get used to my new body. Alan attacked, and wondered if the source of this power was a spiritual core. If so, it has time limits. He still has a chance to win if he can hold out in the arena until the effect ends. Dodging another blow from Sid, he said happily that it was wonderful to see his reaction. With those words, he activated the black sword. His essence seemed to split in two. One part whispered that the enemy was already dead. Alan used the time-stop seal and ice waterfall, broke through the enemy's defenses and asked, "So that's your defense?" The opponent barely got his shield up again and thought to himself, a real monster stood before him. Alan called the double time seal again and created another icy waterfall. Sid was stunned by the power of a single strike. Alan swung and counted down 3, 2, 1. The monster advanced toward him and said it would destroy him with a single swift blow. As the sword swung, a girl suddenly stepped in front of Sid, shielding Alan with her body. The girl cried out for him to stop. She knew he was not that cruel. He stared at her in surprise, as if wondering who she was. Leah gave her name and asked whether he had forgotten her. Alan's body had been taken over by another entity, so he did not recognize her. Leah warned him not to interfere, or he would be harmed too, and asked if he did not remember how they had eaten Ramzak and argued. She reminded them how much fun they'd had. The monster cut her off roughly. "Be quiet. You're going to die now." Leah begged with all her strength, asking him to come back and to be the way he was before, and she meant it sincerely. Yet the core soul's voice spoke inside Alan's head again. This guy has enough willpower to seize control. Holding back was pointless. Even under pressure, Alan did not give up and eventually came back to himself. He fell straight into Leah's arms. Worried, she asked if he was all right. Alan reassured her that he was fine. He apologized for scaring her and thanked her. She believed in him. It was her voice that brought him back. Gratitude rose in his chest. But at that very moment, the core's voice came again, asking if he could hear it. Alan lost consciousness. When he came to, he did not know where he was. As he sat on the bed, a friend suddenly attacked him. The hero instantly blocked the blows and counterattacked. Leah slept beside him. Calling to her, he looked around and saw that it was a hospital. He could not remember how he'd gotten there. The last thing he clearly remembered was Sid's icy strike. Then something inside him seemed to burst with joy. Whatever it was, Leah woke up first. Her worry was obvious, and it moved Alan deeply. He felt embarrassed by his natural reaction to the beautiful woman. She jokingly called him a rascal. At that moment, Rosa woke up. They greeted each other. Rosa asked how he was feeling. Alan said he was fine, and that satisfied her. Looking at the wound, he saw the deep cut had left no trace. The director said the core is the embodiment of the soul. It had seized control of the body, and such powerful entities are rare. A special danger hides in his soul. Alan thought about those words. Leah said there was nothing to fear for now, since the core's activation had drained all its power. They needed to discuss what to do next. At that moment, Leah came in, saw he was awake, and sighed with relief. Alan apologized for making her worry. The girls asked the director to explain what happened to Alan. The director assured them she would explain everything. First, the situation had to be made clear to the hero himself. The director said both academies were disqualified for breaking the rules. Alan admitted with regret that it was his fault and apologized. The sensei reassured everyone it was an accident. But punishment is still coming because the executive committee of the 5 academies issued the verdict. They banned him from entering the academy for a month. Rosa asked again whether it was only a suspension or a full ban. Leah confirmed the director was right. Leah said it was hard for her to admit, but Rose and Leah were punished too under the principle of collective responsibility. Alan shouted that it was unfair and demanded to know why they had to suffer. The director replied that they had been representatives of the academy and had not intervened. That was the official version. She suspected it was a conspiracy. They want to weaken them. An important trial called Spiritual Garment will take place in a month. The ban on attending lessons could seriously harm their powers. Alan apologized gloomily, but the girls smiled and said not to worry. The main thing is you're alive. As for the suspension, it can even be celebrated. The director turned to the girls and admitted it was her fault. If she had been more persuasive, she might have been able to protect them. Instead, there was only noise and two stubborn old people. Leah said firmly she would take all the blame and that they would all be punished together. Rosa agreed they would not let responsibility fall on one person. The director sighed and apologized again. Alan said thoughtfully that he would have to stay in the dorm for a month and would get out of shape. Sensei smiled and said, "Don't worry, they have a great idea. In the coming month, they will all turn into magical swords." A few days ago, friends visited the director. Leia welcomed them and asked how Alan was feeling. Alan said he was fine and his tests were normal. Leia brightened on hearing this and was about to speak, but Alan asked permission to pose one question. He asked what had happened to him during the sacred festival of the 5 academies. The director replied briefly that it was the spiritual core and assumed Leia had already guessed. She nodded and explained that the spiritual core is the soul's power hidden inside every person's body. They appear in many forms like ancestral spirits, legendary monsters, or even ghosts. The director said they'll spend next month with the Charming Sword Squad. It's an official punishment, so they won't be paid. First, they'll go to Alexto to the Unification Division. The commander is an old acquaintance of hers. Soon they arrived and saw a large, old, run-down brick building with small windows. The friends exchanged surprised looks. This was the Magic Sword Squad. Rosa smiled and asked whether they disliked the view. Leah hesitantly suggested they at least go inside. Alan supported her. Maybe it's not so bad inside. They knocked on the door and were let in. Inside, there were many people and an unbearable stench. Alan realized his fears had been confirmed. This place was truly awful. One of the men noticed the women, said they were pretty, and offered wine. Alan replied that they appreciated it but had other plans, shouting that no one had asked him. The man threw a beer mug at him. Leah cried out, but Alan calmed her and told her it was okay. If they make a fuss, the principal could get into trouble. It wasn't that bad. They had only splashed beer on him. He suggested leaving. One of those present spoke to the attacker. "Listen, Dredd. The guests think you are unworthy. Show them what you can do." Dredd shouted, "If you think you can laugh at me and just walk away, you're wrong." This went too far, but he could not draw his sword. Alan simply laid his hand on the hilt, and a fiery aura flared around him. Alan asked if anyone objected. Dredd sharply changed his tone and apologized that he had drunk too much. Alan forgave him, but warned him to be more careful with alcohol. He turned away and asked the girls if they were all right, then suggested they rest for a bit. Leah sighed. Everything was fine, though it was a bit scary. A burly man with mountain-sized muscles approached them, sitting in dark glasses and reading a newspaper. Alan decided to ask him for the information he needed, but the girls objected. Leah said Alan had lost his mind. Rose agreed, saying the man was scary. It looked like he had killed more than once. Alan laughed and said it looked like a reception for killers. Leah echoed him, and Rosa said they should get mentally ready. Alan apologized to the man. Towering and slow to rise, the man asked who they were. He said he'd never seen them here. They might be new volunteers from LIA. Alan confirmed the man's guess, and the man said, pleased that he had remembered at least something. He continued, "She called recently and asked him to watch the students but gave no explanation. When he called back, she did not answer." The friends apologized for their teacher's behavior. Bones. Dalton introduced himself as the head of this unit and said he was pleased to meet them. The friends also gave their names. They exchanged polite greetings, and Bones named each person, saying he remembered that they were the ones with the experience. Bones said they must first finish registering as Magic Knights, but that only applies to Alan and Leah. Rosa answered her friend's silent look, saying she had worked with the Magic Knights and was registered long ago, and Alan thought she already had experience. He filled out the form and handed it to Bounds. Bounds read it carefully and assured him that all the information was strictly confidential. Then Bones asked them to wait while he made the tokens. He stepped out and his friends laughed at how scared they had been. Rosa said he seemed scary but turned out to be nice. Alan added that he had kind eyes, and Leah joked, telling Alan not to talk too much. A commotion broke out in the tavern. Someone shouted that he had ruined the order. Others urged a punch to the stomach. The friends were surprised. Another fight had started, and it seemed to happen here all the time. Bones peered out from behind the door and demanded to know what was making the noise. Rosa said there was another fight. He just muttered that it's always like that with them. Both culprits started making excuses, saying they were joking, and Bones said threateningly that in our squad, when people fight, both are guilty. Anyone who breaks the rules will feel the force of his fist. He really beat them both. Friends said it had been brutal. Bones apologized, saying everyone here loses their temper in a second. Bones then handed over tokens as proof of his status as a magical knight. Alan noticed a bloodstain. One of the beaten men confirmed it was his, from the commander's hand. Everyone thought the same. Never make this man angry. Bones asked if they were ready to take the first task. Alan replied yes, and everyone agreed. Alan then asked why they had volunteered in the first place. The friends briefly told their story. Bones advised that if they wanted to learn more, hunting monsters was the best path, and their friends were surprised because they had expected butterflies. Bones laughed, saying chasing butterflies teaches nothing. Monsters are the real work for warriors. Alan objected that Leia had suggested butterflies, but the commander just waved his hand, said she always confuses monsters with insects, and handed them the hunting instructions. Leah admitted she used to hunt goblins in Vesturia. Rosa added that chimeras are strong, but the three of them can handle it. Alan pictured ogres, goblins, and chimeras. He had never fought monsters before, but now he was not alone, and with practice they could handle it. He approached Bones, handed over 3 sheets, and said they wanted to accept a job to handle 3 monsters. The commander examined the papers carefully. They went hunting. Leia asked Alan if he had ever seen monsters. He said no, never. He had heard of them many times. They are often seen on the roads. Alan said he was born and raised in an isolated village in Goza. Alan stopped suddenly and became alert when he noticed something. They were goblins. Alan said they would follow the plan because this was training. They had to attack head-on. The girls agreed and moved forward. Alan ordered the attack to start. First sword, then shadow in flight. Ogres appeared. Leah stepped into the fight first. As expected, it was impossible to strike the ogre with a sword. An assault was necessary, and she started it. Alan was already about to help her, but Leah handled it herself and apologized for going ahead. A chimera appeared before them, a creature much more dangerous than the previous ones. They decided to attack together, but Alan moved first and was beside the monster in a moment. He could hardly believe he had run that far. No time remained. He launched an attack with blade number 8 and the Yatagarasu technique. By the time the girls reached the chimera, it was already dead. Leah was indignant. They and Rosa will never learn anything that way. Alan apologized. Leah asked if he was already stronger than the ogres. Rosa added that she wondered where that power had come from. Alan shrugged. He did not know. Maybe it's because of the fight with Sid, or the interaction with the core. Rosa said they must not let him run ahead anymore. Leah agreed that they also need to train their souls. Alan figured he had plenty of time to get stronger. When they returned to the unit, Bones was surprised to find all 3 monsters already defeated. A week later in the tavern, Dredd came up to Alan, motioned for him to sit beside him, and asked who he was with. Alan did not understand what it was about, but Dredd insisted he stop pretending and asked if he was seeing Leah or Rosa. Alan was outraged. Everyone had misunderstood him. There was nothing between them. The knights just laughed. He realized no one would believe him and that explaining was pointless. Alan sighed and said it wasn't his fault if rumors spread. The knights had no choice but to agree. At that moment the girls arrived, apologized for being late, and offered a new task. Bones said today's mission would be simple because he trusted them. Alan was surprised. He had expected monsters, not guards. The commander explained. It turned out the order was from an old woman with a bad back. Then he added there was one more task. This time, from him personally. His friends were surprised. Bones explained the earlier order leads to Dresia. A big festival called the Dido Shopping Festival will be held there. Their job is to watch what people buy. Their friends were even more surprised that they could go to the festival, since they were supposed to be serving a punishment. Bones said angrily that they behave like first graders every day, talking only about school, and that they are children. The allies welcomed the chance. The commander repeated that it was an order. Anyone who objects must speak up now or they will regret it later. Alan thanked them sincerely, and the commander wished them luck and confirmed the decision. When they arrived at the client's house, Miss Shendi beamed with joy at the students from the Academy of 1,000 Blades. She relaxed. They say the school is declining, but these children uphold its reputation. Memories came back. Leia Blackfist was especially strong. Her fighting style was bare knuckle, a beauty who could scatter swordsmen with a single blow. Only Ferris from the Ice Academy could challenge her, but even Ferris never beat the beautiful Leia. The old woman wanted to say more. They had already reached the trading town of Dresia, and her friends said everything was ready. Miss Shendi thanked them. It had been a long time since she had such a heart-to-heart. Suddenly she clutched her back and groaned. Alan asked what happened. Her reply was that her back hurt. Her friends wanted to take her to the hospital, but she refused because she had not yet fulfilled the agreement and still had to deliver the wheat. Alan offered to do it for her. The old woman agreed. He told his friends to take her to the hospital. They agreed and asked if he could manage alone. Alan confirmed and added that when it was over they would meet by the clock tower. They said goodbye and went their separate ways. Alan reached the right shop, told them he had brought wheat from Miss Shandy, and went inside. Rocky, the shop owner, asked who it was, then said he did not believe such a kid was a real knight, asked for the contract and began checking the grain. After checking, Rocky said the wheat was bad. Only half the price would be paid for that. Alan was outraged. Something was wrong. Alan asked for another check. The seller got angry and said he had no right to judge the quality and called him a second-rate knight. Alan snapped that he grew up in a village known for its farming. Alan said firmly that wheat was wonderful. He had grown up on it. The merchant muttered something about an annoying child and called someone from the back of the shop. 2 burly guards appeared, and the owner said this young swordsman was going too far, pointing at Alan. The bullies came up to him and said kids must obey adults. They said he would have time later to make amends. They demanded he apologize to Rocky immediately. Alan refused to give up. Devaluing such fine wheat was unfair. He asked one last time for the price to be reviewed. The shopkeeper ordered the guards to teach the rude boy a lesson. They agreed, saying young people now need to be taught with fists. At that very moment, both of them hit the floor. Alan refused to tolerate rudeness and showed what real discipline looks like. No sword, but with character. The boy asked again if Rocky would accept a fair price, and Rocky agreed fearfully, apologized, and paid the full amount while asking them to check. Alan counted and everything matched. As he started to leave, the merchant asked who he was, and the boy just smiled and said he was no one special. Alone, no princess, no scholarship hunter. But that alone is enough. Meanwhile, 3 women in black spotted Alan. One of them suggested they deal with him quickly because the next mission was already waiting. The second girl with 2 pigtails said she liked his face and asked if she could take his head after the fight. The third sighed. Her tastes had always been strange. At that moment, a man's voice rang out. It was the mysterious number 18. He greeted her politely and said he did not mean to frighten her. One of them answered coldly. She did not know who he was, but since he once noticed them, he must be ready to go to another world. All 3 activated their techniques. Two Tails commanded, "Kneel, King of Coercion." Another encased him in ice, and the third summoned the Great Devourer. They promised him a painless death. The stranger instantly threw them in different directions. The group stood stunned. He cried out that nature had given them strength, and they had no idea, pointing to their vulgar clothes meant only for show. He didn't mind people who deliberately drew attention to themselves. Letting things go too far was another matter. The girls did not understand who he was or what he was saying. The man said sadly that the hardest thing is watching nature's gifts go to waste. He had to admit to himself that Leah was really sharp, because she had already foreseen that they would start hunting Mr. Allen. The director asked him to protect Allen because she feared the other directors who wanted him expelled might act harshly. Number 18 promised to carry out the order, but his tasks still needed attention. Leia allowed all the materials to be removed. The main priority was Alan's safety. He was about to leave but asked to say one thing. It turned out he wanted to keep an eye on the girls too. Both were charming, so he asked for permission to look after them. Tempting images filled the man's mind. Leia became angry when she heard what he had just said. He immediately backed off, saying it was nothing and to forget it. She warned menacingly that if she touched them, she'd start disciplining him again. He remembers well how that goes. Blushing, the man stepped outside and muttered to himself that guarding Alan, helping Leia, and keeping his temper was a terrible job. His mustache felt oddly itchy today. Meanwhile, Alan walked down the market lane and looked around. He sensed the shopping festival at Dido would bring adventure. The festival was packed. Will they manage to see it all in one day? They chose matching outfits. Later, the girls stood before Alan in a new look. He was completely captivated by their appearance. Rose said it was time to get to work. Alan asked where to begin, and Leah replied enthusiastically that they should start at the food court, and no one objected. We ordered so much food that it barely fit on the table. Well fed, they saw a shooting range and other attractions. In the end, we won everything we could at every location. But then they returned all the prizes. They said they hadn't had this much fun in ages. One shopkeeper was surprised and asked whether they felt any regret. Alan smiled, saying the experience was more than enough and the trophies still would not have fit. A huge building caught his eye. Rose said it was the Dido Trading House. 5 powerful merchants rule there with unmatched wealth and political power. Only the directors of the 5 most influential academies rival them. Now Alan understood why everyone here was so serious. Alan was amazed at how much Rose knew. She said she had been here before with her grandfather. The young man immediately asked whether he had been a master of the soccer style. Panic suddenly broke out on the street, and people started running away, screaming. Alan saw several people in black moving away fast, trying to figure out who they were and what was going on. Rose guessed they had broken into the trading house and were probably looking for the 5 major merchants. They likely set off at the explosion. Many people in the crowd were injured. One man could barely stand and begged for doctors and knights. Meanwhile, the squad commander gathered his men to evacuate the merchants. Everyone who could move went with him. Alan told the girls he would join the defense. They quickly backed his plan. Approaching the knight commander, Alan introduced himself and said he came to help. The commander brightened, said the merchants were on the upper floors, and invited Alan to join them. When they reached the required level, they saw a fierce fight between the attackers and the merchant guards. The young man noted that these guards were true professionals, coordinated and experienced. The commander ordered the heroes to press on. Further up, they found a wounded knight. He rambled, muttering about his sword as if it were no problem. Their faces filled with worry and nothing made sense. From the shadows stepped a man in a hood and mask. Fallen guards lay around him. Seeing the newcomers, he smiled and announced that new toys had arrived. Alan grew wary, unsure who the man was or why he was acting so strangely. A stranger called him by name without warning. Alan didn't even have time to react. The stranger confirmed again, saying it was him and he could not be mistaken for anyone. Alan asked who he was. Instead, he took offense, which was rude, since they used to love each other so tenderly. Rose and Leia shielded Alan and told him to move ahead. They will hold off the madman, so it is better to split up. The man then mockingly suggested they sing a love duet. Alan ran to the door, thinking the merchants should be there. Inside, he found frightened traders and asked if they were all right. The young man said he had come to rescue them, and one merchant sneered that being a magic knight made him only a common mercenary and mocked their lack of guards. But Alan had no time to answer because he was no ordinary mage. Alan barely held back his anger, but the shopkeeper just said such an honest guy would hardly lie, and her colleague was outraged and insisted it was impossible to trust a stranger in that situation. She snapped that his cowardice had left them unguarded. Now the forest is being cut and splinters are flying. There is no choice. As he led them out of the room, Alan thanked her for the support. Wanting to get away quickly, she said so, but she liked him, young and already having reached the top floor on his own. Alan said he was not alone. She just smiled. His eyes and posture showed years of training. Modesty is not needed here. Alan led them quietly to a secret exit, explained that this route would take them straight to the first floor where they could find the guards, and the girl pointed out that without this plan he would not have come for them. Embarrassed, the boy admitted he was hurrying to his friends. Leaving them there, he walked away. I thought on the move that Rose and Leia were strong girls. They would manage. A gnawing fear squeezed his heart as he ran, praying they were safe. When he came back, he shouted their names. His voice faltered. What he saw took his breath away. The girls lay motionless, and the stranger was gone. Alan rushed to Leia, but a stranger's voice from behind welcomed him back. He claimed to be having fun with his allies. They proved weak and would not even speak. The young man whispered an apology for arriving too late. The enemy proved too strong, and both girls were defeated. He would never allow anyone to disrespect them. Hatred burned in Alan's eyes. The stranger smiled as if to say that when you look at me that way, I cannot control myself. As Alan stepped forward, the opponent admitted he had been waiting for this meeting. He dreamed they would cross swords. Alan still did not recognize him because he was the same unlucky swordsman. The young man flinched. How does he know about this? He looked closer. The stance was familiar, the autumn rain style. Only one person used it. Dorel Button. The opponent laughed. Finally, Alan recognized him. Rumors once said he disappeared after that match, but Dorel only gave a crooked smile, surprised that anyone still did not understand what was happening. Seeing how surprised Alan was, Dorel continued, saying that after that fight he was not himself. It was unthinkable for such a genius to lose to someone like him. He deliberately left his wounds unhealed to keep that hatred alive. Burning rage forced him to change. For the first time he became strong only for revenge. He laughed after saying this, joyful and mad, and Alan realized with disgust that the sword had been his old strength, while Dorel said it alone had let him calm a heart crying for love, and that was the spiritual core. Dorel praised his vision, saying he truly understands him like no one else, then attacked. Alan was surprised. The strikes were the same as before, but he felt no recoil. The enemy smiled and said it was not over, first an autumn rain and then a summer downpour. His attacks changed. It was a completely different swordsman. The old moves were probably just a decoy. He could not have formed a spirit core and mastered the style so quickly. The same kind of genius, but born of rotten roots. Dorel shouted that he was running away and called him a fool. Alan realized he couldn't gauge his strength and was losing momentum, so he had to force his opponent to waste energy on defense. With a sharp turn, he used the 8th sword Yatagarasu. Steady rain, a heavy downpour, a piercing storm. Mad Dorel twisted his face in pain and said the grimace was an extraordinary beauty. The blade cutting flesh pleased him. Cutting, stabbing, chopping, tearing, shredding made him feel connected. The hero was determined not to let the madness throw him off balance and needed to stay calm. Think it through, remember every detail and find the key. Suddenly, an idea hit him, and he blurted it out like a bolt of lightning. Your opponent said excitedly that they were the first to guess. You understand each other without words. You are bound by the red thread of fate. It makes no difference. In the shadow world, no attack can touch him. He is invulnerable. But the hero disappointed him, so that will not happen. Dorel smiled slyly and urged him to show what he could do. Alan steadied himself and invoked the secret technique, Morasam Rain Flow. Channel your whole spirit into a single strike. The strongest. The one that cuts through the world itself. Dorel froze, unable to understand how he had done it, since he had been in the shadow world. Alan himself was a little stunned by what he had done. Hundreds of millions of years passed in the world of time, and suddenly his sword cut through space itself. At last, he realized this was the very special thing he had been searching for. Hundreds of millions of years later, he mastered it. The most powerful strike that cuts through worlds. Dorel admitted the hero had truly cut through the world of shadows. Impressive, but expected. It's a pity time is limited. They will meet again very soon. Alan ran after him and tried to stop him, but the enemy was already gone. The ground shook. The hero cried out nervously, asking if they had planted explosives here. Grabbing the girls, he ran, shouting that everything was about to explode. A powerful blast hit, and he shielded the girls with his own body. Reyes dashed forward and used the dry garden technique to put out the flames. A smile crossed her face. It was a shame the festival did not have fireworks like those. Everyone immediately went into a fighting stance. Find the swordsman. The hero told everyone everything was fine, and that he had beaten him. Rose admitted he was strong. Leah said with regret she could not help him. Raiz anxiously asked if he was okay. Alan thanked her for saving him. She said there was no need to thank her. She had only done what she had to do. He said in surprise that putting out such an explosion instantly was unbelievable. Raiz smiled and called it simple defensive technology. She still hadn't introduced herself. One of the 5 merchants identified her as the owner of a small shop called the Fox Shop. Alan introduced himself as a student of the Academy of 1,000 Swords. Raiz said she had heard about him from her younger sister. Her sister is named Ferris. She is from the Ice King's Academy. Apparently he beat her favorite. She became very angry. It is not worth worrying. She probably owes him. Alan protested in surprise, insisting he owed her. Raiz placed a finger on his lips and smiled softly. All right, she said. If you ever have trouble, I'll lend you my power, but only once. He agreed. She really liked him. Hugging him, she started to flirt, but her friends instantly pushed her away, saying, her friends pulled Raiz away and muttered in disgust that she should not cling, because it looks unpleasant. Raiz smiled, praised how loyal his guards were, but warned they had to stay alert. People in black cloaks called the Black Knights are known for attacks, kidnappings, murders, and smuggling. They say there are very skilled swordsmen among them. Those swordsmen have already stood in their way, so they should expect revenge. With that, Raiz said goodbye cheerfully. There was still much to do, but they would meet again. Alan said he had expected the merchants to be stern and that she would be kind and pleasant. Rose took offense and asked, "Where exactly?" 3 weeks later, Bonds looked at the papers and noted with satisfaction that the final task was complete. They did an excellent job. Because of them, all the piled-up requests were finally cleared. Other mercenaries can follow their example. Outside, the hero smiled and said that although it was hard, he liked being a sword mage. Leah admitted it was scary at first, but is even fun now. Rose added that it was a worthy, if dangerous, pursuit. The hero asked if it was time to go back to the dormitory. Leah replied happily that they would finally return to the Academy of 1,000 Swords tomorrow, and Rose is looking forward to soul shell classes. The hero smiled, thinking he would finally master this power. Tomorrow will be a special day. A little later, Leah sincerely praised them. They did great this month, she said. Their faces grew bolder and more confident. Later, back in class, Leah smiled and noted that the boys from Class A had not been seen for a long time, and Rose joked that they were a whole month behind and needed to catch up. Seeing Alan confused, the girls asked what had happened, and he said he was worried since everyone had been disqualified because of him. Leah said he was not to blame. Rose added that he should not be too hard on himself. Shido was the first to break the rules. Leah went to the door. The first lesson would be about the soul shell. Everyone was probably already in class. The hero thought he should apologize first. As he entered, classmates warmly welcomed them back. One of the knights asked why he was so gloomy since this was a real success. The hero, surprised, asked whether they were angry. Bowing low, he sincerely thanked and apologized. Bubble hugged him and said loudly to stop that and tell how their stop went. Leah cut the conversation short, saying class is starting, and we'll talk during the break. Finally, everyone is here. Starting today, we begin studying the soul shell. Surprised, the hero asked what the soul shell lessons would start with. His classmates said they had decided it that way. Ornichi agreed to lead these classes after their return. The hero sadly thought how grateful he was to everyone. He felt really awkward. Bubble put a hand on his shoulder and asked why he was so gloomy again, and whether he thought they had done nothing for a month. Under Leiza's supervision, everyone trained their bodies. Then they all completely undressed and began showing their new muscles. Bubble smiled and said the training was brutal but worth it, then offered a match, and Lei stopped them and told them to get dressed. A real test awaits them now. Their weapons will be heavy, so prepare for the strain. The teacher warned that these swords are very expensive, so treat them with care. Tired, Leah picked up the sword. The hero grew worried and asked what had happened. Leah apologized, saying she had been making strange noises. Rose admitted she felt heat and excitement. Leah explained it was a special sword that activates only when wearing the soul shell. True swordsmen feel pain when they touch such a sword. That means their spiritual core is waking. Now is the time to listen to it. Let them speak to him, challenge him, and try to master his power. The soul shell embodies that power. There is no need to be afraid. If something goes wrong, she will protect them with her power. Now is the moment to begin. Let them close their eyes and focus. Awareness must sink into the world of the soul. If all goes well, they will see the core. The hero looked into the sword's reflection and slowly slipped into a trance. A spiritual core met him in the soul world with a sly smile and said it had been a long time. The hero saw the monster in him, his core. It agreed and mysteriously added that it should be so. He asked if the demon would finally give him a body. The hero protested angrily, saying that if it happened, his rage would consume him again. The demon answered one word: rage. Having such power and not using it is foolish. Attack, destroy, enjoy. But the hero said firmly that they were too different and that he wanted a quiet life. The opponent grimaced. Calm felt boring. The hero insisted he would never give him the body. The opponent had saved the hero's life, so repaying him with harm would be too cruel. The hero agreed eagerly, but the story stopped abruptly. With no way out, he had to act first, but sleep is overtaking him. Ultimately, there was nothing to be grateful for, but no reason to regret it. If he refuses to hand over the body, send him away. The demon wants to sleep. The hero shouted that he had come to him on his own. The monster lunged forward and shouted that even as a joke it was not funny. The blow was so strong that the hero flew back and cried out in fear. That power was stupid. The arm almost broke. The demon mumbled that it happened earlier than planned, but there was nothing to be done. If you don't want to die, come here wanting to die. The hero chose not to wait and went on the offensive. I used the 8 swords technique, but a spirit appeared behind me and said this knife cannot cut its flesh. He grabbed the hero by the face and pinned him to the ground. Here strength comes from the heart. He is not yet ready for this fight. The hero's friends realized he would struggle to control his other self, especially since the antagonist chose to stop joking and to play seriously with him. Leia intervened with her power. The opponent shouted in disbelief at the technique. Realizing it was a trap, he bared his teeth and sneered that it was the trick of a fool like her. She replied calmly that she simply did not like his dirty paws and then destroyed him. Then she added that the body was weak but very resilient, as one would expect from a monster. Leia asked what it was and how she was. It dawned on her that this was Alan's core, incredibly strong and so evil. At that moment, the hero came to and asked where he was. The director was relieved and said he had finally come to, adding that she now understood what the power of recovery is. Remembering everything, he asked the sensei what had happened to the monster, and she reassured him there was no need to worry because she had restrained it with her power, so he apologized and thanked her. And Leia said that was exactly how she had imagined it. The hero thought sadly that the director had spoken about determination and endurance, and it goes beyond his limits. Surprised, he turned to his classmates, asking who the man was. They said he was the leader of that gang, Raisu Bortgun of the Crooked Swords. He froze, stunned that it was the same school bully and that he had been accepted here. The guard apologized to Leia and promised to remove him immediately. She nodded and said it was fine. She liked those hot-headed students. He had barely arrived before he was already in a fight. It reminded her of the old days at the Academy of 1,000 Swords. Alan, meanwhile, dreamed of a quiet life. The hero stepped forward, introduced himself, and asked what the man wanted from him. Razuo looked at his friend and wondered how someone so weak could be allowed to take part in the Sacred 5 Academies festival. He assumed the man had bribed someone. Turning to Alan, he sneered that Alan was the loser from the Kenjutsu Academy, and that his style was odd for having no school and being self-taught, and the man believed he and Dorel had been cheated in that fight. But the hero replied calmly that those were only rumors. Tesla stepped forward and ordered everyone to be quiet and stop talking nonsense. Alan tried to stop him, but Tesla only grew more heated. Tesla asked Razuo if he had watched the festival's final fight. Remember, Razuo started weak, but in the end absorbed his spiritual core, crossed the line and was disqualified. Alan's ally said no other conclusion could be drawn after that fight. The opponent sneered that you were as worthless as he was. Tesla drew his sword and used the rusty iron style. The opponent sneered that Tesla was pretending to be friendly but still wanted to fight. Class A spectators shouted for him to beat the opponent. Under pressure, the hero watched his friend with admiration. He stayed calm, parrying and dodging with tiny movements. His defensive tactics had changed completely. The opponent counters by summoning 3 skeletons. Tesla was stunned and unsure what was happening. The enemy declared the end, and a rain of skeletons fell on him. When an ally fell, his friends rushed over to see if he was all right. Razuo mocked him, calling him a weakling. He added that Class A was full of talentless kids like him, and like the main character, they always get in the way. She shouted that it was enough. He calmly asked her to explain where he was wrong. In the swordsman's world, everything depends on having a soul shell, and focusing only on muscles is foolish. Now is the time to see what Class A can do. Class B has long since surpassed them. The friends were stunned. It seemed they all already had soul shells. Alan asked a comrade to set up the trial and went out to the battlefield himself. Leah and Rose joined him and wanted to fight together, but the hero excused himself. He asked to be allowed to fight alone this time. The girls agreed in surprise, and the opponent sneered that he had finally come out and demanded to know where his friends were and whether it was 5 against 1. Alan decided he didn't care about the teasing. Class A was completely different. They are not only after talent with a sword, and he does not regret putting off training in the soul's shell. The opponent sneered and called him a rag, but Alan focused and struck first. His wild speed stunned everyone who had not expected such agility, and he kept fighting. Facing 5 alone, he won't let them disrespect his friends and definitely won't forgive it. Alan summoned the 8th sword, Yatsugarasu, and almost instantly defeated all 5 opponents. Raiju whispered in surprise, "This is absurd. They lost to that idiot without a soul shell." The hero replied calmly that it was simple. If a swordsman lacks experience, even the best soul shell will not help. Their defeat showed they simply lack basic physical fitness, the simple, boring, but essential kind. Alan admitted to himself that he was still green. If he could master his spirit core, no one would dare touch his friends. Then something burst inside him. Only now did he begin to understand this feeling a little. Even after millions of years of training, he could not grasp it earlier. Strength is born from the resolve to fight for loved ones. It gives confidence and unwavering victory. This is what Leia meant when she spoke of the strength of spirit. Joyful shouts from his friends pulled him out of his thoughts. They cheered that he was awesome, saying he beat 5 shelled enemies in seconds. Rose winked. While Lilimyu and Teresa read the news, they learned Razuo and 4 thugs had attacked freshmen, leaving them all hospitalized after a fight with Alan Rodoruya, and that name came up again. Historia, the 3rd girl by the window and student council president, spoke thoughtfully about inner turmoil, her uncertain admission to the Thousand Blades Academy, and the blood at the sacred festival. Alan might have been involved in the explosion, but his skill was undeniable. The sacred festival is coming again to reveal who will be the strongest freshman. Meanwhile, the academy has started a new intake. The hero waited for Leah, and when she arrived, she apologized for being late. She admitted she had been sleeping badly because of the soul shell lessons. Her mind hasn't switched off for a whole week. Embarrassed, she asked him not to look at her in the morning. Alan apologized and added that even when she was sleepy, she was as beautiful as ever. Leah blushed. She realized he had just called her beautiful and wondered if he often looked at her that way, but he denied it awkwardly. They stepped into the yard and saw a huge crowd of students, and Leah asked if he thought it was a bit crowded there. The crowd roared, calling them heroes. The girl was immediately recruited for the cheerleading squad. The hero was asked to join the mountaineering club, saying there is nothing better than reaching the summit. Faced with such pressure, the friends were confused at first, then decided the best option was to flee. Alan ran into the classroom, caught his breath, and sighed. "We're in serious trouble." Leah agreed. She had already been scared. Tesla suddenly appeared in front of them, greeted Alan, and pointed to a tall stack of flyers, all from judo clubs, and Barker came to mind, grabbing him as he left, inviting him to join and promising to build up his back, so he felt doomed to go. Today starts Recruits Week, which everyone calls the freshman hunt. Tesla suggested they stick together. Alan said it would be tough. Leah had heard about the chaos but never imagined it would be this wild. Alan looked again at the stack of papers. Someone had clearly worked hard. "I'm curious who put in so much work to print all this." Rose approached them sleepily, barely moving her lips to say hello. Leah warned that it is dangerous to walk around the academy while sleepy right now. Rose agreed. The hunt is already in full swing. Rose asked which club they wanted to join. Leah has not decided yet, and Alan hasn't either. Rose was thinking too, and suggested they look around together after class to see what was interesting here. The protagonist picked up a few flyers, flipped through them, and thought this was real student life, and he wanted to find something of his own when the principal entered and the lesson began. After classes, the friends left exhausted. Alan sighed. Today had been a hard day too. Leah muttered that they felt like empty shells again. Rose said she was tired in her head, not her body. Alan thought about his spiritual core, still losing but learning to dodge fast and make decisions. And if he could avoid even a scratch, he was getting closer to mastering the shell. Leah called, and he had not heard her at all, and Rose asked if he wanted to check out the cheerleading club. When they arrived, they saw something incredible. The participants were doing acrobatic tricks and chanting across the hall, "Academy of 1,000 Blades is the best." Alan was thrilled. The moves looked really cool, and Rose liked them even more than she expected. Leah admitted that cheerleading is not her style. Overly revealing clothes bother her. Rose disagreed, saying it's cute. They watched with interest as the training and practical exercises went on. A break was called, and Alan admitted the club was nothing like he had imagined. He wanted a freer, more open style like in fencing, so suggested looking at other clubs. Suddenly, someone called to him, asking if he was Alan. Not waiting for an answer, the girl said it was definitely him. It pleased her that he was interested in her fencing club. Alan wanted to say he was not really thrilled, but she cut him off and asked how he liked her training. Realizing she hadn't introduced herself yet, she said her name was Shiruti Rosetto, deputy head of the judo club, and added that she was very pleased to meet everyone. When Alan gave his name too, she said, "Unbelievable, it's really you." Shiruti could not hide her excitement. It was simply wonderful. Shiruti offered Alan a sparring match right now. He apologized, saying he and his friends wanted to visit a few more clubs. She repeated the offer. Alan politely refused again. The girl realized he had refused a second time. Then she blocked their path by summoning faceless translucent warriors. She apologized, but she won't let them go that easily. Alan realized she wasn't going to let them leave without a fight. Shiruti replied that you do not see such talented newcomers every day. Alan sighed to himself. Something had gone wrong again. Meanwhile, the coach announced the start of the bout between Shiruti and Alan. The hero tried to think positively, telling himself it was nothing, just a sparring match with the deputy head of the Kenjutsu club, and they fight without soul shells using only wooden swords. She smiled and said she would yield to him a little. Alan thanked her for her concern. The fight began. The hero assessed her and saw no weak point. Maybe she just shifted her center of gravity. It could have been a setup for a strike. "Try the first sword, Flying Shadow," the girl said in surprise that she had blocked it. It was already too late. Alan activated the 8th sword, Yatagarasu. Shiruti countered with a spinning technique called the wind circle style. Impressed, she saw the hero skillfully slip out of the dangerous position and launch a counterattack. Still, she said the blow was too soft. She admitted being a little surprised but ordered a stronger attack. Alan could not break through her sword defense but believed it could be done, since he had never faced a style like that before, and his previous opponents were completely different. With each passing moment, his interest grew, and he decided to give it his all. Alan attacked even faster, more accurately, and with more force. Shiruti tried to stop him but could not. He realized it was happening too fast. He should keep improving his skills if he wants to be called a master. His strike was lightning fast, but she managed to dodge. Alan thought that was to be expected from the vice president. Now he will get even faster. She suddenly asked for a break and questioned whether he had cheated at the festival, because he was noticeably faster now. Alan asked again, surprised she really believed it, and he was pleased to hear that. She had said she needed time to think about the strategy, and the hero was surprised she would take a break to come up with one. He asked if she had a moment. Shiruti smiled and thanked him warmly for his support. The hero felt lucky. She disappeared in the night glow right in the middle of the tournament. The coach ran over and Alan ordered them to carry the stretcher. They declared him the winner. After a while, friends in the classroom discussed the duel, and the hero complained he was completely exhausted. Leah praised him, though there were some mishaps, and the performance was decent. Rose asked which club he had decided to join. He said he hadn't decided yet. He liked everything but still hadn't found the right one. His friends were upset, and he was surprised and wondered if he'd said something wrong. Then Leah spoke up with an idea. Leah suggested they start their own club. Her friends were surprised, and she turned to the hero. Would he like to start training? They could form a training club. Slightly confused, the boy admitted the idea really made sense. The girls jumped for joy. It turned out you could just train and call it a club. Imagination swept them forward. Leah thought, at last. She found a legitimate reason to spend a full 3 years with him. Rose grew even happier because she could hone her swordsmanship beside him. Both of them said cheerfully that they had to start training right away and ran off somewhere. The hero stood still and thought. He could hardly believe they wanted to train like that, and suddenly felt a warm joy deep in his heart. Within minutes, they rushed into the classroom with permission to open the club. Leah said she would be the advisor, and Rose read the rules, saying the club needed 3 members. Perfect timing. There were 3 of them. The hero was surprised at how fast it happened. Rose said they had to fill out the form, with him as leader and Leah and Rose as members. Then it was time to choose a name. Without hesitation, he suggested the simple name Training Club and asked what they thought. The girls raised no objections. Then the question of where they would train came up, and the hero suggested a corner of the schoolyard, though he mumbled it wearily. Just then, Tessa and her classmates stopped by and asked what they were doing. When they heard about the new club, they immediately wanted to join. A girl said she wanted to combine her workouts with swimming, and the hero replied there was no need to rush because they had not yet decided exactly what to do. Tessa figured that since the main character was here, this had to be the training club, and the woman beside her confirmed he was the star, while Leah asked anyone interested to sign up. Once registration ends, training will start right away. The attendees welcomed the idea with enthusiasm. Soon the first training sessions began. This was how their club was born. They stood silent with swords in the schoolyard. Odd but focused. A low-budget tournament awaited them. The main character knew nothing about it and was surprised. Leo asked how he had not heard about the club competition. Each club sends a trio to the tournament. The fights go on until the last fighter. The winner will earn a prize for their club. Rose said it will be a real war. After reading the rules, the hero was surprised by the difference between first and last place. Leah added that first-year students must take part, except members of the student council. Combat armor was banned because newcomers were joining. Rose said it would now be a fair fight between fencing masters. They reviewed the budget, and the hero asked whether it would be enough. Leah suggested joining other clubs to buy equipment together. That was a great idea. We had to decide who would represent the club. Tessa refused because he was competing in judo. Another girl was also representing the swimming club. Were there any other volunteers? The hero meant those already in other clubs. Everyone raised their hands except Leah and Rose. That was expected. Leah announced they would perform as a trio. Rose added that, as always, it was just them. Everyone formed a circle and promised to do everything they could to win. The tournament officially began. The participants whispered among themselves. 2 burly guys said proudly that this time they'd show what they could do. Last year, after the humiliating defeat, they wanted to disappear. This year, the only goal was victory. They even wanted to topple the student council. Observers were struck by how intense the passions were. The hero felt the tension all around him. Leah explained that for the big clubs, it was a chance to survive. For Rose, it was a war of elites. The hero agreed. Fights against those who give their all will be a great test for the 3 of them. At last, the host announced the official opening of the club budget competition. Last year's winner opened the ceremony. Student Council President Sia Custoria stepped onto the stage and greeted all the participants. The hero asked Leah if being ahead meant she was likely strong. Leah answered without a doubt. The heads of all the academies are real beasts. Rose pointed out that just last year, Shia was a freshman, but she beat a 3rd-year member of the fencing club. Her style is complete domination. The hero wanted to see with his own eyes how they handle a sword. The council chair formally opened the contest. The assistant called out that the long-awaited opportunity had arrived. Time passed, and the hero's girls were already stepping up to the challenge. A true fighter. After another win, Leah said their club had pulled well ahead. Rose added that it was a great start. The hero was certain the fencing basics had paid off. The host announced the final round. where the strongest will face off in the arena. The training group has already been dubbed a secret sword society. See you, warriors. They called the training club the Dark Horse. The hero thought it was a disgraceful display by their team. The host announced their opponent would be the absolute champion from the Thousand Swords Academy. At the front, Secretary Lilimut Seren, in the main force accountant Teresa Macdelot, and leading the team council chair Sia Custoria. The vice president said the defeated must leave the country. The hero was outraged and called that an unfair punishment. The host called Leah and Lilimut to a duel. The hero wished them luck, and Rose asked if there was room for mistakes. Her friend said confidently that everything would be fine. Mia attacked first, but despite her efforts, she lost. The judge called the fight over. Lilimut, a representative of the front line, was the winner. Teresa won the main match. The victory went to the student council. Lilimut said it was easy. Teresa disagreed, saying they were almost equal. It turns out they are first-year students. Leo sadly apologized to the friends. Rose said they were just unlucky. The hero said it was not a big deal, and second place was already a great achievement. He slightly regretted not taking on the council chairman. The host announced the start of the awards. Suddenly, Sia asked to say a few words and declared that the tournament winner was the main character. She noted the main fights were over, but there was no decisive match yet. Neither she nor Alan took part, which was a bit unfair. The hero was thrilled and had not expected a chance like that. Yet he felt something was missing, and truly wanted to fight the council chairman. He thanked her for being honest. She said they should go ahead. All teams supported the decision. The host confirmed the main match will take place. The friends were worried. Leah asked him to be careful. Rose added that the girls from the council were incredibly strong. Alan smiled and said he understood. When he entered the arena, Saya said she had heard a lot about him. The hero joked that not all of it was pleasant. She agreed and said she planned to tame this devil. He seems friendly today, but it's time to put emotions aside. The real fencing begins now. The hero accepted the challenge. The host introduced them, naming Alan Radaroa, a troubled student suspended a week after joining, and the heiress of the Acustoria family. She signaled the start. The hero attacked first with the flying shadow technique, but she dodged, and her mist technique worked perfectly. He wondered how she could have predicted it. Alan used the cloud style and the feather clouds technique, but it had no effect. She dodged every strike. Pearl said she had heard of his unique style, but she did not hesitate and counterattacked. She praised him, and her nervous system registered a matching reaction to his movement. The hero thanked her and thought she even managed to deflect his cloud attack. Her reaction was incredible. She asked again, insisting this was not all, then told him to show his true power. Feeling challenged, he admitted her basic techniques were better than his. The council leader noticed that he had grown stronger, but his movements were still too obvious. The hero said it was only the beginning. Alan used the Sakura style and the mirror cut technique. It looked like he had won. She tried to strike back, but he disappeared. She scanned the area for him, but he was really gone. Wasting no time, the hero landed the fifth sword blow, but she managed to handle it. Sia said the strike was strong but lacked speed, and she didn't even bother to parry seriously. The hero realized she had immediately spotted all his weaknesses. Sia smiled and asked what he would show next and if that was everything. Alan, frustrated, launched a furious attack. The commentator said the council leader easily parried every blow. Leah prayed he would hold out, and Rose marveled at her composure. The hero kept fighting and admitted her technique was flawless. Parrying, attacks, and balance marked a true master, and she immediately sensed his inexperience. Even so, fighting a warrior of that caliber gave the hero great pleasure. The match drew him in more and more. Pushing himself faster and faster, he dreamed of beating a strong female rival, even if it meant using his last strength. Suddenly, her sword snapped, and for a moment she froze, unable to believe it. Just a moment, and the result is here. Even Alan didn't expect this twist. Leah was thrilled because the council head's defeat came as a complete surprise. She praised her friend, and Rose, admiring him, asked what technique he had used, but the host had already announced that Alan had put on an incredible fight. The hero couldn't tell what he felt. He asked his opponent if she was okay. She smiled, had no scratches, and admitted she had honestly expected a draw. Later, the friends were eating in the dining hall when Saya came and asked Alan for a moment. Seeing the head of the council surprised him. Smiling, she apologized for interrupting his meal. The students whispered that the chair herself had come to see him and wondered what trouble he had caused this time. She invited him to the council office. He said he would come later, but she insisted. Leah quietly suggested that Rose go after them, but she said let him finish eating. In Sia's office, she asked him directly whether he had deliberately yielded to her during the duel. The hero began to protest, but she cut him off sharply and told him not to lie. She then asked which blow had broken her sword. The hero confessed he did not know. It was not his strength. It seemed something else helped. She said he caused her emotional trauma and must take responsibility. The hero panicked, afraid he had hurt her and unsure what to do, but she calmly said it was very simple. She said without smiling that he had humiliated her in front of everyone. As compensation, he must join the student council as a public figure. The hero was surprised, thinking this was punishment for an emotional wound. She confirmed that his victory had ruined her authority, but he objected that he runs a training club. Teresa and Lilimut started pressuring him. Refusing was not an option. A partner like Saya was rare. Being active in school life mattered to him. The hero froze. This was blackmail. They assured him that being a public figure does not involve much work. Just attend the council lunches. He promotes his style, and that suits them. She asked directly if he was with them. The hero began to thank them for the offer, but then stopped. Suddenly, the girls rushed into the office, refusing to give up their hero. Their club would not give up its leader. Alan had not expected to see them here. Zia asked if they were the girls from the training club. Leah repeated that the hero was the head of their training club and she would not let anyone take him. Sia grimaced at so much fuss over something small. All they had to do was attend the council lunches. Leah objected that he always ate with them. Rose added that she would not let anyone steal those precious moments. Saya suddenly invited them to join the student council. What will they say? The girls were stunned. No one expected an offer like that. Sia added that public figures always find work, and she would be happy to have them on the team. This summer they will go to a resort. Boys and girls in swimsuits from morning to evening, with both training and rest. Please share your thoughts. The hero asked in surprise why everyone had frozen. His friends suddenly urged him to join, and the council chair is a wonderful person. He couldn't believe his ears and asked Sia what she had said to them. She just smiled and said it was nothing special, and she had only explained some details. Now the decisive moment has come, and he must decide whether to join the council, while his friends look at him pleadingly, urging him to agree. Realizing it was pointless to resist, the hero agreed to join the council. Sia and her friends celebrated, but Lilimut warned that trouble awaited him, and it was all because of the girls. Time passed, and the first meeting of the renewed student council began. First, introductions. Lilimut Serene was first to introduce herself, the council secretary, a second-year student in Group A. Second, Teresa Mcdelot, an accountant in the second-year Group A, asked to be treated with respect. Sia spoke third, a second-year student in Group A, and suggested working together smoothly and in a fun way. The hero's friends also introduced themselves. Sia said she had handed all authority to her deputy, so there would be little work. Lilimut added that at regular meetings they only have lunch together. The hero now hides illegally in the Gurnaria Empire. His friends were stunned to learn this. It is the same dark place where forbidden magic is practiced. The council head explained that when they chose the punishment, she joked she wanted a blood diamond. He actually went to look for it, even though those diamonds can only be found there, so he is a fool. Lilimuse suggested ending this silly argument and eating in peace. Teresa agreed, and everyone fell silent for a moment. Then Zia said they had already decided where to spend their summer vacation. Lilimut shouted that the protagonist would definitely be surprised. There is a resort on Mount Visharia where celebrities go. Teresa cut in angrily, saying those words were supposed to be hers. Her friend ignored her and kept talking about the barbecue they had at the villa last year, and Teresa finally tried to speak. She noted the villas have their own beach. Alan admitted he had never seen the sea. Everyone was surprised, and he blushed because he had grown up in the mountains. Saya winked and said seeing the sea for the first time would make him feel better. Leah and Rose immediately looked embarrassed, which did not go unnoticed. Sia shifted the topic. Since summer camp was mentioned, everyone is preparing for exams, the hero and Leah confirmed. and Rose calmly said she had not prepared at all. Her friends were shocked by the statement. She asked in surprise what was wrong with it. She joined the Academy of 1,000 Swords to refine the Sakura style and one-handed swordsmanship. Her life is training, not schooling. Fuming, Teresa reminded everyone that if she fails her exams, she will have extra lessons all summer and will not join them at camp. Everyone went pale. From then on, the hero and Leah trained Rose every day for the exams. They worked through past exam papers with her, and all that was left was to hope for some luck. After some time, Teresa returned the graded work. Leah asked Alan how he did. Alan said he did well and added that Leah got the highest score, praising her sincerely. Then they asked Rose. Rose smiled and said she passed. The minimum threshold was met. Friends were happy. She thanked them, saying it was all because of their help. Leah said happily that they were now all going to summer camp together. She could hardly wait. The hero wondered why they were going first to the council head's house rather than straight to the airport. The next day, everyone gathered at the academy and set off for her estate. The hero could not hide his surprise at the size of the house. Leah said it was logical, given her status. The Akustoria family is one of the best known, and its members hold top posts in Ringhard's government. In her hometown, everyone knows the name. If he watched the news, he'd know too. The hero laughed. It didn't interest him. At that moment, she called him over as she gathered her group. Everyone greeted each other warmly. She asked whether he liked her new outfit and if it suited her. He said it looked wonderful. She thanked him and asked everyone to follow her. They stepped into a wide clearing where a huge plane stood. Alan was stunned. It was the first time he had seen it with his own eyes. He had never flown before. They explained it was the Akustoria family's private plane. Leah asked whether only council members would fly. Saya replied that the consultant would arrive later. She added that there was enough talk and told everyone to board. Time passed, and they arrived at their destination. Leah pointed to the view and told the hero to look at the beauty. An endless blue sea stretched out before them. The hero thought happily that this was the sea, endless and without borders, just as his mother had once told him. He breathed out with awe. It was incredibly beautiful. Sia said the villa should be cleaned first. The friends asked if they should clean too. Sia said firmly there would be no cleaning. Lilymoot smiled to herself, knowing the real reason was the mess in the head's room and the scattered laundry. She suggested that her friends relax by the sea. The hero even noticed how pleasant it sounded. Slightly relaxed, they headed to the villa. At the entrance, they were greeted warmly and kindly. Amazed, the hero stared at the enormous villa. Rose noted that everything here looked very upscale. They saw a net of watermelons and asked about it, and someone explained it was a traditional game where a blindfolded player finds and smashes a watermelon, and Leah eagerly suggested they try it later. At that moment, an angry mob burst into the villa. Their leader grabbed Leah's hand. Friends rushed to help, not understanding what was happening. The leader pushed Alan away. The allies stood back to back. The hero counted about 20 enemies and asked who they were. The leader ordered no introductions and warned the princess would die right here. Leah used a flash and attacked. Rose shouted for everyone to run, but the gang leader ordered them to block the exit. Shouting that no one should leave, he ordered everyone surrounded. Leah used the Supreme King style, Alan the 8th sword, and Rose the one-handed Blooming Sakura style. Then the hero unleashed a powerful strike, Yatagarasu, Sakura Flash. In the end, the enemies were crushed, and the leader, groaning, muttered that it was impossible they had lost to some kids. Alan confirmed the battle is lost and they can no longer resist. He asked Rose to summon the knights and approached Leah, who asked if she was the target, and he confirmed they called her a princess. One enemy stood up, gritting his teeth and saying he would kill that bastard, meaning the hero. His partner asked if he was in his right mind. The leader replied that the mission had failed and the leaders would kill them anyway. So it was better to take the risk here and now. The whole gang began turning into monsters. The friends were stunned. Suddenly, the hero realized that all the opponents had emotional armor. Leah noticed the enemies were acting very strangely, and Alan agreed that their mental armor was unstable, but he did not know why. The leader struck so hard the hero was stunned, and it was only a single sideways swing. That blow shattered the beach into pieces. No one knows where he got such incredible power. At that moment, Leah used the interception style, then the Fafnir technique. The hero shouted that she had succeeded, and now it was his turn. Monsters were closing in on them. One of them said they were all doomed. The hero noticed the leader's physical strength had also increased and wondered what was happening. Leah countered with a powerful strike in the Supreme King style. Suddenly, the leader grabbed her leg and said, "If we kill her, we'll survive." Leah. She screamed for him to take his hands off her. The hero warned her about the danger. She saw everything. At that moment, the hero shielded her with his body. They suddenly found themselves behind an ice barrier. No one knew where the shield came from. The leader tried to cut it, but all attempts were in vain. He exploded in anger, cursing the protection and saying the man seemed bulletproof. Then someone appeared who used the ice spear style and shattered the enemies with a single strike. The barrier broke, and the friends saw Sid sitting before them as if nothing had happened, and he asked if there were problems with the fish. Everyone was confused, more by him calling the enemies fish than by how he appeared. Ferris appeared nearby and, annoyed, told Sid to do something about his freezer because it was freezing here. Sid apologized. Ferris added that in such cold she could not enjoy her tropical vacation. Stunned, the hero looked at them and had no idea what the people from the Ice King's Academy were doing here. The question was written on his face. Ferris laughed and said they were here because their student council also had a summer camp here. The protagonist, confused, asked if Sid was his subordinate. Sid was offended and did not care. The protagonist said it was nothing. He just had not expected it. The girl laughed again and said he was a bit crazy when you think about it. Sid protested, asking what she meant by "when you think about it," and insisting he was not that stupid. Ferris smiled and told him not to worry, saying he was cute in a human way. The hero noticed how politely Sid treats Ferris and wondered what their relationship was. A helicopter suddenly appeared above them. When it landed, Leah stepped out with her assistant number 18. Alan was surprised to see her there too. The girl asked what they were doing and hoped they were having a great time. Leah asked again if she was actually allowed to come. Ferris said she was dying of boredom and it was her only chance. Escape felt inevitable. Seeing Ferris, Leah asked what she was doing here. She answered boldly that she wanted to know why she had to see that awkward face on the long-awaited vacation, and Leah grew angry, demanding to know what the fox humanoid had said. At that moment, Rose arrived with a squad of knights. Their commander declared they were the holy knights sent to rescue everyone. But when they reached the battlefield, the enemy was already defeated, so the commander ordered a rescue team to be called. Rose said with regret that she was a bit late. She hadn't realized how far the Night Watch office was. The hero reassured her it was fine and thanked her. Spotting people from another academy, Rose asked why the Ice King's Academy was here. The knight leader called out while holding the crystal, saying it was a phantom pill the whole gang seemed to have taken. He ordered immediate contact with headquarters, and the hero was surprised that the pill came from a phantom crystal. The sudden boost in strength and the appearance of mental armor came from those pills, and the main target was Leah. At that moment, Saya arrived with her friends, apologized for being late, asked what had happened, and the hero briefly explained the events. After listening carefully, she proposed something unusual because the idea grew out of that incident. They proposed hosting a summer camp with the Ice King's Academy, and it puzzled everyone. The hero spoke first, and this will not be a break, but real madness. He worried that the enemy's target was definitely Leah. It seemed they could be agents of a hostile state or organization. Sometimes he forgot that Leah was a princess. Trouble always followed her. If he could help, he would do everything. Then he heard his friends shout. He turned and saw all the allies already in swimsuits. Leah apologized for being late. Rose asked coquettishly how he would rate their looks, and the hero blushed and mumbled that they looked wonderful. Lilimut pointed out that it was obvious. Teresa said his eyes showed everything, and only the director looked wary. She asked whether he could resist girls at all. The hero begged them not to mock him. Then she said it was time to go now that everyone was here. They will join a summer camp with their rivals, so everyone should make the most of the time. The hero wondered where their director was, whether she had already changed and run to the sea, and whether she was really their leader. When the allies reached the beach, Kane greeted them warmly and welcomed them to Askeen Academy's private beach. Kane had been waiting a long time for the meeting, and the hero was surprised that it was the same Kane who still remembered him. The hero asked Sid if Cain had always been so peaceful. Sid looked surprised and asked what he meant. The hero apologized and said he did not mean to offend. Sid explained that Cain had become like that after the sacred festival. The idiot who lost to the hero locked himself away for 100 years by choice. This led to a nervous breakdown. A century in oblivion did not pass without leaving a mark. At that moment, Cain ran up to them and said the hero's spiritual power was a gift from the gods. Unfortunately, Cain could not endure that path and lost his mind. He asked whether he could call the hero a god. The man blushed and asked him not to say that again. Sid turned away in disgust, annoyed by the scene. At that moment, Leah called her friends over since they had already arrived, and she had agreed with Ferris, so she now knew their training plan. Everyone was surprised that their director was talking about work. She became indignant, worried about what they thought of her. Ferris suggested holding a competition at sea and on the beach. Leah immediately said their team would win. Ferris replied that Leah must have overheated in the sun. Watching them, the hero thought it had started again. The head of the Ice King's Academy suggested starting with a beach volleyball lesson. First team, Alan and Leah. Second team, Sid and Cain. Leah urged her team forward. Ferris warned her players that if they lose, they know what will happen. The game began. The teams took the field, and the Thousand Swords Academy quickly pulled ahead. After a few rounds, the hero shouted to Leah that this was the decisive moment and told her to pay attention. The server served the ball, but Sid shouted that he was a wimp, and the server replied with an ice wolf strike. The hero answered in the style of the cloud with white scales, but no matter how hard he tried, they lost. Ferris announced the final score, 21-19, victory for the Ice King's Academy. Sia said the next contest would be a capture-the-flag game on the beach. Sid warned Cain not to get in his way. Cain said it was not his first time here. She did not know she was facing a real man. At the command, Sid bolts off at full speed in Trojan horse style, shouting that the flag is his. Ferris praised him and said he did a great job. Sid realized he had to be more careful. Ferris cheered that their guy was the best. Saya added that the decisive round was still ahead and it was starting now. That was how the day of the Academy representatives ended. That evening, the hero replayed the day's events in his mind. The hero realized that although he was tired today, the day had been very productive. Competing with rivals really motivates. Training alone is fine, but group sessions are important and more fun, and when he came back into the room he said he'd just arrived. Shia and Ferris waited for him and both immediately looked quite strange. The protagonist said hello, then froze in place. The room's atmosphere shifted suddenly. On the table were truffles made of xian with champagne. Teresa and Lilimut were drunk too. The secretary said she would fight with the sword Excalibur, while the accountant would defend herself with a magic shield. They grabbed his hands, pulled him closer, and smiled as they asked if he wanted to talk to them. Rose suddenly appeared in front of him. He asked if she was going too. Brushing back her hair, she checked if he meant the truffles with champagne. Yes, she had tried them. In her family, it was normal that everyone had a high tolerance for alcohol. She glanced at the others who were already snoring quietly. She said they were just weak. The hero agreed, and from that moment, truffles were forbidden. After that, he asked about Leah. Rose said Leah was a little shaken after the attack, but hid it so no one would worry, staying strong and fine now. As her friend, the hero wanted to help, and Rose agreed. And when everyone went to their rooms, he breathed out and froze when he saw Leah, who said she had been waiting for him. Apologizing for arriving late, she said she needed to talk about the group that attacked her. She got straight to work. It could be mercenaries using dark magic or agents of the sacred empire of Ronaria. She is now investigating both. She learned that 20 people who were being transported by the Holy Knights had been killed. The attack happened during transport to the prison. It is now official. The hero was shocked that it was murder. The director continued. The autopsy found they were all completely burned to ash, and the effect of a tablet made from a phantom crystal was confirmed. The hero remembered the gang leader swallowing a strange pill, and Leah suspected today's attack was a field test of those pills, aimed at kidnapping her. So the 20 people were only test subjects, and the group's leaders were true fanatics. She warned him to be careful, and he asked why she was telling only him and not everyone. Leah wanted to say something important about him but changed her mind and said it was better this way for now. The next day, under the blazing sun, something incredible happened as bubbles appeared over the sea. Suddenly the water around began to boil. Friends fell into the sea from their floating rings. Sid and Kane decided to play a prank to scare everyone. They did whatever they wanted. Some chatted while others built sandcastles, and the day slipped into evening. That evening, Ferris invited the students of the Thousand Swords Academy to her villa and served them her family's best barbecue. The table was overflowing with food, and the hero thought this was exactly what he needed right now. Everyone wished each other a good meal, and the feast began. Sid walked past his friends and suddenly snatched the fish from Leah's hands as she was about to eat it, and she shouted that he had no right to do that. Sid held the fish and said he thought it was a very poisonous species. Ferris did not believe him, saying the local fishermen had checked the fish, but Sid doubted they had inspected everything properly. He ordered all the fish from the villa to be brought to him because he wanted to check everything himself. The hero was surprised, as he did not expect him to know about fish. Kane said proudly that Sid was a true master of fish. The hero was startled that Kane had been by his side the whole time and he had not even noticed. Kane continued, saying Sita was raised in a special family where knowledge was above all else. It made him think Kane must be some kind of mystical figure. He thanked Sid sincerely for saving Leah. Leah thanked him too, saying that without Sid it was hard to imagine what might have happened. Sid replied awkwardly that she was talking nonsense. He had only noticed by chance, and it did not mean he intended to save her, and called her a fool. The hero noted that Sid had a good heart, if not for his swearing. Rose smiled and agreed. Alan suggested they forget the incident and enjoy dinner. Despite everything that happened, the summer camp was fun. He wished this quiet time would not end. In the evening, they had fireworks, and the friends watched them with delight. Leah suggested going back to camp next year. The proposal pleased everyone. The next morning, Leah and Ferris began arguing again, this time about a tie in the game. The hero thought they had finished everything so well. Sia could not bear it and asked them to stop arguing, saying the decision would be made at the Royal Sword Festival. Seeing the surprise on the students' faces, she explained that it was a festival where all the fencing schools competed for the title of the strongest swordsman. Sid asked if the festival winner was the true winner. The hero said he had no objections. Sid agreed. Facing the hero, he promised to repay the sacred festival debt and warned him not to lose before then. The girl from the Ice King's Academy was surprised that he had just called someone by name. Another said the ice around his heart had finally melted. Sid grew angry and told them to be quiet. Ferris laughed and said they would finish on that note. Sia said it was time to return. Everyone boarded the plane. With their disagreements settled, the joint summer camp came to an end. Everyone went home. Leah asked the director why she was wearing a suit. The director said a gentleman would visit her today, so she was going straight to the office. The female director left, and a young man in lavish clothes appeared before the hero. Friends noticed his uniform, and the hero wondered whether he was an aristocrat. Suddenly, the young man launched an attack using the domination and destruction style. He kept attacking wildly. The hero could not believe it and wondered where such strength came from. Alan shouted angrily, asking what he was doing. Shielding Leah with his body, he shouted for the jerk not to even think about coming near her. Leah, confused, called him Curoto and did not expect to see him here. The hero asked in surprise if she knew him. She explained that this was Curoto Stroganot, commander of the guard of the kingdom of the western region, and wondered when he had managed to reach that rank. Curoto said he had not seen her for a long time. Just then the director appeared and Curoto pressed his sword to Leah, unsure what it meant, and Leah replied coldly, "Hello to you too," which only made him angrier because he could not accept a worthless person standing beside the princess. The director noted he is going a bit too far. These two have a special relationship. Curoto was outraged and refused to accept any special relationship, insisting they were not a couple. Leah tried to explain he had it all wrong. She was the hero's subordinate, in short, his slave. Something clicked in the royal commander's head. Shocked, he asked again whether she was a subordinate or a slave and looked to the princess for confirmation. She froze with embarrassment and confirmed it. Curoto went pale, began to sway. His nerves gave out and he fainted. Friends rushed over. A woman shook him, trying to revive him. The hero suggested carrying him to the medical station. The young man slowly regained consciousness and stood up. The hero asked if he was okay. "You call that all right?" Curoto turned with a look of pure horror. "I'll show that microbe what hell is like." He said he'd freshen up a bit and come back. Then he turned sharply and left. Leah tried to stop him but failed. She could barely hold back a laugh. The protagonist thought it was harsh and probably the worst moment lately. Meanwhile, Curoto arrived in the kingdom and told the king everything he had heard, and the king, unable to believe it, demanded confirmation that he had heard correctly and that someone had shamed his daughter. Curoto confirmed that everything was exactly as stated. The king was furious. This was unforgivable. He ordered the scoundrel brought to him immediately and said he would punish him personally. When the heroes arrived, the courtiers bowed low to the princess. Sighing, she said she had almost forgotten how they greet her so formally here. She then apologized to the hero, saying she really had forgotten how things work in the royal palace. He told Leah he was fine and she did not need to worry, but she looked him in the eyes and asked why his face said the opposite. He did not know what Curoto had told the king, but the letter showed clear anger. Leah was anxious too. Her father ordered her to bring Alan. The hero decided that, since it was like this, he would have to explain everything in person. He hoped the king would understand. A court attendant reported the carriage had arrived and asked her to be careful when boarding. The hero felt the courtiers' hostile glances and began to doubt that things would be all right. Then Leah called him to the carriage, and they soon arrived in the kingdom. The castle was so majestic that the hero could not take his eyes off it as he approached. Leah, seeing his amazement, said it was impressive. At the gate, the guards saluted as the princess returned. The gates opened. They entered the grounds, and everyone warmly welcomed Leah back. The hero noticed that even the guards treated her with respect, which made sense because she was the king's daughter. Entering the castle, Alan was struck by the luxury of the halls. "This is another world," he thought. Leah said she hadn't been here for 3 months, but she still missed it. She said she grew up here and ran through the corridors as a child. He smiled, easily picturing it. She asked if that was a compliment. He replied by asking what she thought. The courtier said they would then go to His Majesty's chambers and asked to be especially careful. The hero panicked, with no idea how to act before the king, afraid of saying something foolish and causing an international scandal. Leah noticed his anxiety and comforted him. She said he was her friend, but here he was, a guest. The hero thanked them for their support and said he would still try to speak politely and formally. He knew the king's name. Seeing him for the first time, he immediately realized he was a real monarch. The king suddenly smiled and welcomed Leah back. She answered the greeting. Her father said he had been very worried about her. The hero relaxed a little because he had pictured the king differently and now saw a caring father. He was about to say something pleasant. Leah tried to introduce him, but Alan stepped in, greeted them, and said he was a first-year student at the Academy of 1,000 Swords. Suddenly, the king's face changed. The king asked in a sinister tone if that was the same scoundrel. The hero, confused, wondered what had happened to the atmosphere. The king continued. Curoto had already told him about the man. That was the young man who seduced the king's daughter and ruined her mind and body. The king called him a vile, brazen scoundrel. Alan tried to explain it was a misunderstanding, but the monarch ordered him to be silent. He accused the hero of making her lose her head with flattery and debauchery, and claimed that, being older and wiser, he would not be fooled. The hero thought, "Damn, Curoto has lied about everything," the hero thought. But Leah burst out, angrily urging her father to hear Alan, and the king objected, calling him a devil who even seduced his beautiful daughter and saying he would never be fooled, while Leah insisted the hero was nothing like that, and that if her father would just listen, things would change. The king angrily claimed the hero had simply brainwashed Leah, but Leah snapped, calling it complete nonsense. The king brushed it off, saying the argument was pointless from the start and the swordsman was no hero. The hero tried to calm everyone, but no one listened. Leah kept insisting that Alan was incredibly strong and had even defeated Curoto himself. The king paused and said, "If she says so, let her hero prove it in action. If Alan can defeat a swordsman he picks who is the same age, he will be declared the strongest in the kingdom." The hero could not believe his ears. If she loses, Leah leaves the academy for good and her internship ends with no right to return. Alan repeated that Leah might not come back, and Leah replied angrily that it was absurd. The king told her to be quiet. As her father, he will not allow disobedience. Leah became angry, and the hero thought that if he had not come here with her, none of this would have happened. The king asked the hero what he thought about it. There is still a chance to refuse. Turning around and running away could be a choice. He glanced at Leah and realized she wanted to finish her studies. He replied calmly that he understood. Let them state the terms again. If he wins, he will be declared the strongest. Leah looked at him with joy. Curoto said in a grim voice that it would be his greatest mistake. The fight is tomorrow at 10 a.m. at the main arena. There, the hero will face 3 opponents at once. Nobody objected, and Leah was anxious because the stakes were too high. The hero said no confidently. He agrees. The royal commander led him into a room, pointed at the door, and roughly said, "Here is your lodging, you slug." Wished him pleasant sufferings and asked if he intended to hide his filthy deeds. Leah snapped angrily. He's not a creep. His name is Alan, remember that. If you have any complaints, say them or say what you want. Want to fight me? Curoto backed away and mumbled an apology. That was too much. Leah sneered and asked again, "What did you just squeak?" Curoto turned to Alan. By the king's order, he was to watch him. The hero was puzzled. What did watch mean? The commander clarified that his room is opposite. If the hero wants to go out, he must report it. Otherwise, it will all be reported. To the king. Curoto added, though he was sure the hero would lose, the hero should still get a good rest before the battle. Leah replied, Alan will win. She stuck out her tongue at Curoto, said goodnight, and was about to. Alan asked in surprise why Leah was going to spend the night in his room with that boring guy when her rooms were upstairs. Embarrassed, the girl realized she hadn't thought of it at all. Curoto was outraged that this scoundrel brought the princess to his place every day. Leah snapped that it was not like that at all. The hero confirmed it. Asking Alan to take her to her rooms, she said goodnight and left. Alone, Alan sat and sadly thought his reputation was sliding into the abyss. Everything turned out this way. He only wanted to talk to Leah's father, now complete isolation. Lying on the bed, he thought. He had never felt so alone. Leah was usually nearby. If he loses tomorrow, he will never see her again. He will not let that happen. He wants to be with her at the academy again. So he decided he would definitely win tomorrow. Now he needed to rest. The next day, everyone gathered at the main arena. Curoto stood nearby and grumbled that the slug had little time left. It was time to move. Alan sighed. Her attitude was really heavy. They took him to a room. When he asked where the others were, she said it was the armory for fighters and that arena rules forbid personal weapons, so he could pick any sword. The hero assumed this was done to put everyone on equal footing and keep blade quality from affecting the outcome. The commander added that even a good weapon would not help him. The hero thanked her, realizing this was probably his only chance to talk to her, so he called her over and began apologizing for yesterday. She grabbed him by the tie, pulled him close, and remembered he had seen her naked, so he would not get away that easily. Make him choose a sword quickly. She wants to return to the princess. The hero picked up a sword, and Curoto ordered him to follow her. Alan thought she wasn't even interested. Doesn't even try to mend the relationship. She pointed to the arena entrance and said he should go out as soon as they call his name. Today will show whether he really is what she expected. Today he must leave the arena a winner. Meanwhile, the host apologized for the delay and announced more details. A special duel was announced. From the western gate stepped the most dangerous con man who seduced the princess, Alan Roderuya, and the crowd in the stands shouted for him to leave. Outraged, the audience accused him of betraying their princess's feelings. He would not leave here alive. Someone shouted that he had a treacherous face, just as the king said, and asked if this scoundrel could fight at all. It reminded him of his days at Kanjutsu Academy, where everyone hated him, laughed at him, and waited for him to fail. The crowd wanted him to fall again, but then he heard a familiar voice. Leah called out from the stage and wished him luck. Alan told her to rely on him. He's no longer alone. The audience whispered in confusion, stunned that the princess is supporting this villain and no one knows what is happening. He probably took advantage of her weakness. The king was furious that she supported him, but Leah replied coldly that it was her choice who she supported. The announcer introduced the opponents from the East Gate, the kingdom's two strongest swordsmen, Gallius Stronghand and Romera Lightning. Leah was shocked because the duel was meant to be one-on-one. The king smiled since he had not said that. Gallius, seeing the challenger, just shrugged. It was only a small boy, but if he really deceived the princess, there will be no battle and he will be punished. The hero replied calmly, saying, "Let them say what they want. He will win and take Leah from this place." 1 hour remained until the first duel began. Alan decided that whoever attacks first has the advantage. He rushed forward at a speed that surprised even the experienced fighters. Romera instantly launched the autumn wind style, but Alan dodged it with skill. Romera's power was strong, but his speed did not match Alan's. The maneuver was so sudden that even the hero himself flinched. The opponents did not understand how he did it. Romera was baffled, and Gallius did not have time to understand. The crowd watched and suddenly realized one swordsman had fallen. This is how it happened. In an instant, he defeated the two strongest opponents. One strike secured victory. His strength came from true love for Leah and the desire to be with her every day. The king glared at the result of the duel. Alan apologized and modestly said he was just a bit stronger today. His power stunned everyone. Grizz called out for Curoto and ordered her to step forward. It was her turn. Entering the arena, the girl looked at Alan and admitted she did not expect to become his opponent. The host announced solemnly that before you stood the commander of the Royal Guard, Curoto Strobanoff. Her entrance was the final trump in this match. This fight will decide the outcome. The hero realized it was the final duel. Leah grew tense as she watched them, knowing how strong and dangerous Curoto was. Her body is like a taut steel string. The sword is flawless in every move. No longer able to watch the situation in silence, she knew her time had come. Leah stood and shouted for Alan to fight. She believed in him with all her heart. The hero looked at her, moved. The rival said calmly that he had disgraced the family, humiliated the princess, and would pay with his life. She will expose his truly ugly nature. The host signaled the start of the final battle. Curoto used the Supreme King's style and attacked with full force. Alan noticed her style matched Leah's. He dodged and heard an angry shout ordering him not to underestimate her. The blow was powerful, but Alan countered and leapt high, his move so skilled that even his opponent acknowledged it. His reflexes were impressive, she noticed. That would not be enough. She would speed up. Watching closely, the hero admired her combinations. They were a work of art. No wasted movement. From foot placement to the final sword swing. Grace embodied in a steel blade, Curoto kept attacking. Domination and destruction define her style, but the hero once again dodged the blow. Holding back her attack, he felt the force of every blow. Her training had clearly been tough. He was not easily frightened either. When her attacks grew even fiercer, the hero suddenly disappeared. He appeared just as suddenly using the one-handed Sakura Bloom technique, the mirror. Sakura Slash forced Curoto onto the defensive. The crowd is stunned that their Curoto is defending. The king grumbled that this was only a test, and the real fight for the master's title was still to come. She grudgingly admitted he was a great fencer. He asked if she hated him that much. She said she had trained many warriors, but only a few became the strongest. She asked if he had spent decades in hellish training, and he felt it had been millions of years. She continued, even without talent, he tries to better himself, and that earns respect. But she said coldly that he would not be able to go any further. That was the limit. Her farewell words were cruel. She turned and ordered him to pay closer attention. This is talent. She won't let anyone harm the princess she sees as the meaning of her life. She remembered that as a child, they trained together in the castle every day. The two were almost the same age. One day Leah hit her, Curoto fell and started to cry. The princess rushed to her and asked if she was all right. Curoto wiped away her tears and praised her strength. Leah said he will grow up to be a strong swordsman and defend his country. Curoto said sadly that she wasn't even worth standing next to. Leah objected. The princess said she could not become strong on her own. They must become strong together. Bolia is the strongest and kindest. She vowed to protect those she loves. Curoto will not stop. She will destroy anyone who dares to offend the princess. The hero understood this. She activated her battle form Soul Dress and declared it was the end for him. Spectators murmured as their commander activated the soul dress airform. The real battle begins. The hero realized she had turned stones into birds. With a long sword and control of the air, she attacks from afar. He moved in, but Curoto saw through his plan and immediately warned him it would not work. A giant owl took to the air. Alan was stunned by the speed of its attack, but he managed to fend it off. The girl said she'd play seriously now and began preparing an explosion. A veil of smoke swallowed everything, and the hero could see nothing. Using his technique again, the Mist Moon Sword, he successfully repelled the following attacks. Curoto admitted he was a smart guy, but she was already preparing a counterattack. Explosions filled the space, and Alan shouted that this was a mockery. He had never dodged so many times in a row. It was a real dance among the explosions. He could not launch a counterattack in time. Curoto sneered and shouted, "Don't even try!" Her new technique set off an explosion so strong it almost struck him, and the hero snapped that it was going too far. She pressed her foot into the ground to steady the impact wave. After the smoke cleared, Curoto said that although he could have gotten the soul dress, the battle had changed drastically. She asked if he finally understood that his efforts were in vain. His so-called talent is worthless. He cannot get the soul dress and is not fit to protect the princess. Better to surrender. The hero knew she was right. He could not win that way. A different path was needed. There was no choice. He had to take the hit and risk it to get his form back. Wanting to return home with Leah, he dropped to his knees, leaned forward, ready to take the blow. The blast hit him, and Curoto shouted that he was already at his limit. The echo of the explosion faded. The arena fell silent. Everyone froze in fear. It was a direct hit. He could not survive. He was at the epicenter of the blast. Even Curoto was upset because she had warned him. Suddenly, a light rose from the smoke as he appeared, activated the 8th Yatagarasu sword, and stopped the strike. Swords crossed. Stunned, Curoto asked if he was immortal. The hero replied calmly that he felt everything. Knowing she had the advantage, he would not back down. Furious, she decided to finish it using the 50th sword. Smiling, she said he had thought she could not fend off his close-range attack. At that instant, she unleashed a burst of light that blinded him. The hero saw nothing. The blow was unavoidable. Leah jumped on the spot and covered her mouth with her hands to keep from screaming. It seemed over. Then the smoke cleared. Bent over, he examined the wound. It was not deep. He had been lucky. Curoto snapped that he must eat iron every day, and Alan calmly asked what she was talking about. Now it's his turn, and she warned him again not to underestimate her. She summoned her army of birds again and ordered them to destroy him. Birds exploded nearby, but he was used to it. Her attacks had weakened, and this was a chance he could not miss. Curoto raged. Her techniques and explosions did nothing. He was wounded but still standing. His blade suddenly fell apart. It seemed every sword in the arsenal had a hidden defect. The king stood up, laughed, and said loudly that you had only just noticed it, fool. I told you, if you'd been listening closely. The king reminded everyone that he would never win. Alan whispered scornfully that it was shameful to sink so low. Meanwhile, the host announced the sword had been broken with one strike and asked whether that counted as a defeat. Curoto replied calmly that she serves the princess and would cut down even an unarmed opponent without hesitation if it were for her highness. The crowd froze, then began shouting that he was brave and to hold on. That was your chance to stop. Otherwise, it could end in death. Someone shouted it was the best fight of the year. Alan heard all the shouts, but he turned to his opponent and found it strange that she cared so much. She actually thought he would surrender just because his weapon was broken. It was always hard for him. No fight was easy. This is his path, his fate. Holding her breath, Leah stood on the balcony and prayed for it to stop. A performance without a sword is suicide. He wanted to be by her side, grow stronger with her, and share every hardship and victory. She couldn't stand it and cried out that she wanted to be near too. Always. Her voice moved Alan. He thanked her loudly and felt a real strength in his heart. Turning back to Curoto, he said they would go on, that he would defeat her and free the princess even with his bare hands. After a short pause, she announced to everyone that she recognizes him as a swordsman and respects his courage. Her will stirred pride. They surged forward for one last push. His thoughts tangled and he couldn't keep up, so he had to move even faster. She ordered her air troops to tear him apart, but Alan fought through them with his fists as he ran toward her. At that moment, a blast hit. He stopped, surprised. and asked why she had blown herself up. She answered calmly that he had won. She surrendered. The arena fell silent. The crowd gasped. Leah cried out with joy, and the king grew furious, unable to believe what had happened. Flustered, the host confirmed the winner was Alan. Curoto officially conceded defeat. Victory for the princess and her friend. Alan felt the tension ease. Leah hurried to him, worried. When she asked if everything was okay, he smiled and said, "Don't worry, I'm perfectly fine." After the fight, they took him and his opponent to the doctors. The exam showed he had no scratches, though he was sure his whole body was wounded. Outwardly intact, he felt deep pain. His spiritual core was damaged and could not be ignored. He spoke firmly to the king, saying the king had misunderstood his relationship with Leah. The reply was curt, and the king refused to listen. The protagonist thought the conversation was over, but then Leah lost her temper and demanded that her father hear her out, pressing him for a solution and saying the swords had been switched. The king paused, then announced the young man had handled the trial honorably and declared him the kingdom's new strongest swordsman, saying his courage deserved a reward. More importantly, he accepts his relationship with Leah as love. Everyone around went silent. Curoto could not hold back and reminded everyone of their master-servant bond. Leah cut her off, saying their father had just called it love, not masters. The king clarified that his approval applies only to platonic love. Anything else is disgusting to imagine. Alan quickly confirmed this, and Leah added that there is no need to be so loud. Everyone can already hear everything. The king repeated his warning. If Alan even tries to touch his daughter, he will send an entire army. Make sure it is understood. The conversation ended there. They will return to the academy tomorrow. The king ordered Curoto to prepare everything. Everyone started to leave, and the king angrily struck the throne and told Alan to remember those words. Next time he will plant a bomb and tear him to pieces. Curoto flinched and apologized. Her behavior as head of security was harsh, and she was ready to punish. The king asked what had happened and why she chose to blow herself up right in front of him. She answered, unfortunately, she couldn't do otherwise. If she had continued, she would have died for sure. Grease snapped that he did not understand her and told her to explain more clearly. She described seeing Alan's spiritual form for a moment, a blonde man with terrible features, a true monster radiating fury, terrifying beyond anything she had ever seen. The entity lived inside the young man. The king thought that if she said so, it might be true. He would not interfere, but he needed to learn more about this power. The being's features reminded him of the dragon Fafnir. Gris suspected it might be a modern technique for sealing entities, but the girls thought it was something else. The king was shocked. Such a powerful spirit could not be contained in such a worthless body. But Curoto replied quietly. A resemblance to the dragon Fafnir caught her eye. If that was a mistake, it could end in tragedy. Gris froze, unable to believe what he saw. Then he asked whether Leah herself had said there was love between them. Curoto confirmed it. The king snapped. This girl had set it all up, cast her line and used his daughter as bait, which gave him a new headache. He cursed loudly. It was unclear how much she really knew. Then a thought occurred. Leave this boy here forever. We must act quickly. He told Curoto to summon 3 royal guards and then set off on business. The chancellor will govern the kingdom during the king's absence. Curoto nodded and understood everything. She remembered again that his form closely resembled Fafnir's and wondered if it had been only her imagination. By then, the protagonist was walking and utterly exhausted, but there was no time to rest. He remembered how Gree had acted and wondered why he got so angry when he learned about his daughter's boyfriend. Worried, Leah ran up to him. His face looked exhausted. She asked if he was all right. He apologized. He said everything was fine. Grateful, she thanked him again. It had all happened because of her, and she did not know how to repay him. Most importantly, her father believes they are a couple. If they don't act like lovers, it will be strange. The protagonist admitted she was right. She brightened and asked if he felt the same, and he, a bit embarrassed, asked how people in love usually behave. Leah winked. She had a great idea, and he asked, surprised, what it was. She invited him on a date, and moments later they were walking down Arondo's main street. Leah cheerfully said she hadn't been here in a long time. The hero noticed she was in a great mood, so he didn't have to change schools. Outside the shop, she pointed to a dish of potatoes with butter and eagerly ordered 2 portions. The seller was pleased and agreed immediately. Recognizing the girl as Princess Leia, he asked in surprise when she had returned. She said it was just yesterday because of urgent meetings. People nearby heard the conversation, recognized her, greeted her warmly, and showed respect. Leia was extremely popular. A woman said she thanked the heavens that the princess was alive and unharmed. Seeing a young man nearby, she asked whether he was a school friend or her boyfriend. Alan froze, unsure how to answer. If he protested, gossip would start. Agreeing would make their relationship official. Leia said cheerfully, "Probably a boyfriend." The crowd around them applauded and showered them with greetings. Someone shouted that he would be their future king. Alan grew nervous. It was getting out of hand. The seller handed them buttered potatoes with a smile and said, "Our princess is already completely grown. The treat is on the house." Leia said in the same tone that they were on a date, so everyone should leave and give them some peace. The protagonist thanked her warmly. She had saved him. The seller winked and said, "No thanks needed. Enjoy your time together." After the crowd dispersed, Alan asked quietly whether she really wanted everyone to think they were a couple, and Leia replied confidently that it was true and she liked it that way. She added, "By the way, her father himself said to come back when they finished everything." Alan thought her father was a self-centered man. The princess suggested not to spoil the mood by talking about him and instead enjoy the tasty potatoes, and Alan agreed, thinking she was still angry about the cold reception. When they arrived, Leia stopped and pointed at a beautiful building that was the country's main landmark. It was the kingdom's museum. The protagonist said excitedly that the building was truly impressive. Leia invited him inside. Alan admitted it was his first visit to a museum. She was surprised that teacher Leia would give the tour herself. Pointing to the right, she showed works by Henry the Great. Alan agreed that there were many exhibits. Leia said the kingdom had a rich history. They walked up to a painting of a tall mountain. A strange aura surrounded it, and the young man wondered what it was. Leia said the artist and date were unknown, and that the painting had been kept since ancient times. She did not meet the exhibition's standards, but for some reason they never took her down. Her father always avoided answering when she asked. Alan said thoughtfully that she really was strange. Leia asked if he thought so too. As they moved on, the hero noticed they had almost toured the entire museum. He asked what came next. Leia hesitated, then remembered she wanted to visit one more place, the Hill of Hope. They had been climbing the mountain for some time. Leia said they would reach the summit soon. Alan was surprised that she still seemed tireless after all she had been through. He was already looking forward to a rest, but Leia suddenly stopped and told him to look, saying this was exactly what she wanted to show him. The hero stepped closer to see what Leia wanted to show, and the sight that opened before him left him stunned. From that height, the whole kingdom looked like it lay in the palm of a hand. The princess asked whether it was beautiful. Alan said it was incredibly beautiful. The landscape looked more like a work of art than nature. She thanked him again. He did not understand why. She said it was because he fought for her. Now they can be together, and it is because of him. Nothing made much sense, yet she felt happy. The protagonist, deep down, wanted at least a little rest. Then Leia suddenly changed the subject and asked. When asked about her father, the young man wanted to call him stubborn, but instead he gave a diplomatic answer, saying it was hard to say, but he was sure of one thing. The king truly loves her. The princess agreed, but added that there was one drawback: her mother. She died right after giving birth. People said her health was weak and she did not survive. Leia had no memory of her. The chief knight said that after his wife's death, the king vowed to protect his daughter at any cost, which explains why he is so overbearing. Still, even that love didn't excuse his behavior, a 2-on-1 duel and broken swords. She did not want the hero to hate her father. Alan smiled and said everything was fine, with no anger. Now he was part of her family. She thanked him and apologized for bringing up such a sad topic. He reassured her it was no problem, and she did not need to worry. After a pause, she asked if it had been a difficult conversation. Grateful for her trust, the hero said his father died in an epidemic soon after he was born. His mother raised him alone. Leia said admiringly that his mother is a true heroine and would like to meet her. Alan smiled and said she would be surprised to see their village. Leia said confidently that she would definitely like it. If that happened, he would be the happiest. They fell silent, and a pleasant quiet settled between them. In that moment, they fully understood each other. Then Leah asked if he wanted to make a wish. She said there was a magical spot on the Hill of Hope. When they reached it, the hero was surprised. A giant tree rose before them. Leah said there's a legend that if you hold hands under its canopy, your deepest wish will come true. The tree is said to be millions of years old. Under the branches, they closed their eyes and made a wish. After a few minutes, the girl asked what he wished for. Alan said it was a secret. The hero didn't want to say his wish, but Leah coaxed him into at least a hint, and he smiled, imagining they might wish for the same thing. A little embarrassed to say it again, he simply wanted their time with Leah to never end. Maybe she really did. It looked like she had wished for the same thing. Meanwhile, in another building, a group of mercenaries gathered and their leader announced a new target. One fighter muttered that it was the same old nonsense. A hard slap landed in response. The girl snapped that she must not be ignored. If you are humming, say it out loud. Time to act. The next mission is to kidnap Princess Leah from the kingdom of West Styria. A warrior called out that she was the legendary black and white princess. Now things get truly interesting. Many rumors circulated about her, especially linking her to Fafnir. Everything promised to be fun. Meanwhile, the friends returned to the academy as the second semester began. Leah glowed with impatience, having missed everyone so much. The hero was happy too, as if it were an ordinary day, because walking to school beside her felt like priceless happiness, and she noticed his look and asked if something was wrong. Alan reassured them that everything was fine. The class greeted them warmly. Tessa got straight to the point, asking whether he had become even stronger. He smiled. Only she could say that. Leah welcomed everyone as the new semester began. Just then, sleepy Rosa entered the classroom, but her mood quickly soured. The girl angrily asked where they had been for 2 days since no one had contacted them. Leah said they had spent the time at her house. Rosa froze in shock. Her mood had visibly worsened. To smooth things over, the hero invited her for a walk. Though things settled for a while, he felt it would not last. After the walk, they returned to class. The protagonist looked at his classmates warmly, having not seen them for a month and glad they were together again. Leah walked in behind them and wished everyone good morning, announcing the start of the first class of the new semester. The principal looked over the students and noticed how much they'd grown over the summer. Seeing each of them brought her real joy. Pausing, she urged everyone to pay close attention. Important events are coming. In a month, the Sword King's Festival begins, a ceremony that crowns the best fencer from all academies. The winner will gain fame and great opportunities. Each school can send only 5 candidates, but first-year students still have a chance. Every year, they hold a separate tournament called Freshman War. The main rule is one-on-one matches. Only personal skill and inner strength could win. The hero realized this would be a contest not just of bodies, but of spirit. Leah announced that the rules for the Freshman's War and the exact start date will be announced next week. Those who want to take part should prepare. She asked anyone who wanted to raise their hand, and the whole class raised theirs. The principal said, delighted, that she had not seen such unity in a long time. This year, their class is clearly serious, so it's best to spend the week training to prepare both body and mind for the fights. At that time, the hero met the monster again, and asked if he would get a spiritual shell if he won again. The entity answered yes, but 100 million years would not be enough for someone so weak. Alan smiled. Even that made him feel better. Immediately he attacked, activating his first sword, Flying Shadow. The enemy did not even move, lying calmly and lazily and muttering that he was a fool. The hero launched an unexpected strike, activating the 8th sword Yatagarasu. The monster still did not react. It made no move to defend itself. It simply looked and saw that Alan had gone a little pale. Did something happen? Without waiting for an answer, the protagonist attacked again, and this time the opponent rose and easily blocked the strike, countering and knocking Alan down. So you're giving up already. This frail body can't survive a single blow. If not for, the battle was one-sided. The monster grew stronger alongside the hero, like a mirror image. It felt like an endless loop. He had no right to give up. Even in a hopeless situation, he had to keep fighting to gain spiritual armor. Suddenly, cherry blossom petals swirled around him, seemingly because of Rosa. Leah announced a lunch break of exactly 1 hour. After that, they will meet again for class. Friends called Alan to see the student council room. As he walked, he kept thinking about that Sakura. Maybe he had imagined it. Meanwhile, Leah sat in the dark hall, silent and alone. Her friends asked what had happened. She said she had to talk to them and asked if they would listen to her. Everyone reassured her she was not alone. The director said Leah had calmed down a little and could now share everything. Suddenly, she fell to her knees in front of her stunned friends and begged for help because she could no longer carry it alone. She was confused by her own feelings and did not know what to do next. Her director joked that she was mean and pointed to the table. She pointed to the table, and Leah said, "A whole mountain of papers." Unfortunately, the holidays were over, the work had doubled, and her secretary and accountant still had not returned. She couldn't even get through to them. It seemed they weren't planning to return anytime soon. She could not tell her friends about it. The director begged for help with the paperwork. The protagonist reminded her that when she joined the board, she promised an easy job. Feigning despair, Leah dropped to her knees and begged that her older sister was already crawling before them. They were cruel demons, and Alan lifted her, refusing to swear by his name. He warned it was the last time and there would be no more favors. Leah agreed that if he helped, she would join. Rosa backed them too, since it was hard to refuse. Working together, they cleared everything in 2 days, even skipping their lunch break, and spent the rest of the time preparing for the freshman battle and training. Even giving his all, Alan knew mastering the spiritual shell in a week was impossible, and in the end he didn't make it. The day of the competition arrived. All the contestants stood in the arena waiting for their turn. The protagonist felt a little nervous, but when he saw his friends' smiles, he relaxed. Leah boldly declared she would take revenge today for their first meeting. Rosa added, it was for the loss at the Holy Festival. The hero laughed. He liked the energy and said they were rivals today, so everyone should give their all. Classmates came up to them, all in high spirits. The protagonist joked, asking why they were all so happy. Tessa laughed and said she had come to take revenge. Nearby, a stranger watched them silently. Leah announced the start of the opening ceremony. First-year students stepped onto the stage as the stands went wild and the crowd cheered for their favorites. The director said the newcomers' performances would have a big impact on the upcoming King of Swords tournament. Many of them had already mastered the spiritual shell. Now the real battle begins. She turned to the students and told them to show what their daily training is worth. Drums sounded above the arena. Leah reached for the drum with the names. It was time for the draw. She drew the first slip, and Alan and Razu will compete first. At that moment, someone called to her from the side. It was Razu himself who suggested that the first fight be between representatives of classes A and B, one student from each class. The protagonist thought it sounded interesting. He immediately recognized the boy, a student he knew from Class B. A stranger burst into the classroom. Leah asked the students whether everyone was ready, then turned to the defenders to ask if anyone wanted to back out of the duel. No one refused. Leah announced the start of the competition and said the director had already chosen the first fighters. The spectators felt a rising sense of anticipation. They talked about the participants. Both were problematic. Someone recalled how Alan caused a scene at the Holy Festival. Nothing good was said about Reizo either, so things were bound to get heated. Reizo was consumed by a hunger for revenge. He trained until he nearly collapsed and now planned to settle the score with Alan. Alan couldn't tell whether it was a personal grudge or just a desire to fight, and by then he didn't care. Leah asked if both were ready. Seeing the agreement, she announced the start of the first fight between first-year students Alan and Reizo. The opponent immediately summoned 3 skeletons. Alan thought they had become even larger. Reizo laughed and said he hadn't expected that turn of events. Alan cursed. Strong but not immortal, he was hit by an explosion and it seemed all was over. The enemy shouted that he had destroyed him for good, recalled every past insult and said justice would be restored today. He screamed about the honest victory, the sword festival, the freshman war, saying the other one would no longer get away unscathed. Rosa saw it just in time. It was an explosion. Tessa shouted that it broke the rules. Reizo laughed with a demonic laugh and did not notice. Alan appeared right in front of him, alive and unharmed. He learned to cope with the blasts. If Reizo had used a different technique, things could have turned out differently. Anyone who does not fight with a pure heart cannot win. Leah cried out at the unexpected end of the first match. Alan won, and the crowd erupted in cheers, a reaction that surprised him. Rosa noted that after such an explosion he wasn't even scratched. Leah joked that in her kingdom he ate explosions for breakfast. Rosa turned to her friend and said not to be upset if one of them lost. They had already discussed that issue. Rosa did not object. She will win. The princess blushed. Was that a joke? The protagonist felt uneasy. Meanwhile, Leah began drawing lots for the second fight, slipping her hand into the drum of names. A voice said the name Rosa Valencia, and a memory of her arrival at the academy rose in the girl's mind when, after the fight, the same girl with the black fist approached her. She snorted, saying she did not need emotions. Rosa sighed, thinking that this will still be interesting. As the heir to the Thousand Blades style, she should consider enrolling in the academy. She was back in the arena. Opposite her stood the hero's friend. Leah announced the start of the second match of the first round, the battle between Class A. Both girls rushed in, and the principal noted that Rosa is attacking confidently. She had been pressing from the start. The protagonist thought the strength difference was obvious. A wide sweep, he replied in a moon and dusk style. Tessa noticed. It was time to finish. Rosa used the Sakura style and petals filled the air. She launched a decisive attack. Leah declared Rosa the winner of the second match. Tessa felt sorry for the hero's loss, and the other said she had simply been reading his moves well. The protagonist stayed calm. Smiling, he thought Rosa was outstanding, as expected. Eventually, the time came to announce the semi-finals. Leah announced that after all the exciting matches, it was time for the semi-final fights among Ardenka's candidates. The girls cheered as the real battle finally began, and the protagonist looked forward to the show. Tessa reminded everyone not to forget her, and the audience split, with some cheering for Rosa, others for the main character, some backing Leah, and some asking her to show madness. The main character was to fight in the first semi-final, and Tessa and Leah in the second. They were invited to the arena. Rosa said she had been waiting a long time for a chance to fight him. He said the feeling was mutual. They shook hands. Time to begin. The director gave the signal, and the first semi-final began. Immediately, a cherry blossom-style attack. She was suddenly much faster. The thought flashed through the hero's mind as Rosa launched a sudden attack. He failed to block her attacks. Each blow was precise and merciless. Her speed became her main weapon. When she tried to use blooming Sakura lightning, the hero anticipated it and easily parried each strike. He knew her rule: never use the same technique twice. There had already been Night of Sakura and Lightning, so it made sense the next would be Sakura Veil. She used it. As she moved to attack, he ended up behind her. Leah said they used the same style, but the hero fought with brute force, almost cruelly. He glanced at her in his head and wished she'd stop talking. Anger surged inside him. In a pure fencing match, he would lose completely. It became clear that her sword technique could sweep him away in a single move. Rosa thought about her first defeat and felt empty then, too. The director then asked if she would turn down the offer. Rosa answered sharply. Leah smiled and asked why she refused. Rosa replied that she already masters the Sakura style and does not need any academies. Her main concern is finding a swordsman named Alan Rodorva. Leah smiled slyly. Alan was starting school that year, and she wondered what she would say. Rosa's eyes flashed, and she asked for details. That was why she came. Coming back from her memories, she thought she could not afford to lose. She surrounded herself with a fiery aura. The hero remembered that strange feeling. It was the same energy as before. Rosa unleashed crimson Sakura petals and trapped him. The hero suddenly saw a massive tree and realized this was no ordinary landscape. Everyone saw the tree and said in surprise how beautiful it was. It was a reflection of her soul. Tessa, confused, asked what the giant was. Leah admitted it was a bit inappropriate, but she was captivated. The director was quietly surprised to realize the girl was the granddaughter of that old man, then addressed Rosa and told her not to be shy. A storm of blooming petals began. The hero, surprised, thought Rose had learned to control even them. He replied with the eighth sword, the mythic raven's technique. Rosa trapped him again, and the way out was even less clear. Cherry blossom petals swirled in the air. The hero managed to fend off Rosa's attack, but felt his strength slipping away. A surge of power surprised him as Rosa leapt back into battle in the Sakura style, adding fresh energy to every strike. Her strength was noticeably greater. The hero tried a counterattack, but she stopped it easily. Confused, he still wanted victory, but every attempt hit a wall, and he then realized the crimson sakura reflected the soul and drew its power from the sakura tree behind it. This tree gathers energy from all around, strengthening its body, speed, and even its petal attacks. The hero realized that destroying the tree could cut off her source of power, but it was unclear if he could do it. He tried and was surprised by how strong the tree was. This is not just a projection. It is part of another world, and destroying it is much harder than it seems. Meanwhile, Rosa took the final step and activated her secret technique. From that day on, after the first defeat, she prepared her. Training, mistakes, and steady improvement all led to this moment. Now she could clearly see her goal, to outdo him. Her spirit grew stronger than ever. The hero appeared before her like a phoenix rising from the flames. Her confusion lasted only a moment. Gathering herself at once, she countered the hero's 8th sword with her secret technique, Flower in the Chair. He answered with the mythic raven. In the tense clash, she noticed his strength was already inhuman. He said he had only passion, and it kept him on his feet. Rosa was at her limit. After the crimson sakura, she plunged into the attack without sparing herself. He thought she wanted to end the fight while empowered, but her technique had its limits, and she looked him squarely in the eye. This was her last chance. All her will and the strength of her soul went into the attack. She told him not to back down, to use the flower's core to take the hit with dignity. The fight ended. They left the arena. The hero sincerely apologized to Rosa for the trouble he caused, and she replied calmly, "Another loss. Complete defeat. If this keeps up, there is no chance of victory." Rosa told him not to overthink. It was not the end of the story. From that moment, everything was just beginning. The conversation could wait. She told him not to let anyone beat him until her time came. If he loses to anyone else, nothing will matter. In response, she was told to go to the infirmary at once. By then, the arena was already being repaired. Tessa told Leah it had been an exciting fight. Do not give in. She apologized ahead of time because she won't be merciful. Smiling, the young man said he'd give it his all too. After that, he stepped into the shower and looked at himself in the mirror. Oddly, he felt no pain. His wounds always healed quickly, but this time they started to sting. Something was wrong. His body was acting strange again, and one thought filled his head. It was all because of his true core. After the spirit tried to take over his body, his physical abilities increased greatly. Is regeneration also a result of that? Asking directly was the right move, even if he risked getting hit, because he worried about Tessa and Leah and had to hurry. At that moment, he heard a strange sound. The fight was over. The director said sadly that Tessa had done all she could. Unable to defeat the princess, she drew strength from Rosa's fight and unleashed merciless blows on Tessa. Leia was about to start the final, but both contestants were exhausted, so they agreed on a short break. Leah interrupted her. She stepped forward and said a break was unnecessary, too impatient to delay. She looked him straight in the eye and challenged him to a fight, and he thought she hadn't changed at all. The final duel has come between the main hero and the student Leah. Allies stepped into the arena. The hero felt a wave of nostalgia. 4 months had passed since the induction ceremony. Much happened during that time. Each day in the academy was filled with struggle, tests, and victories. Princess Leia said she had waited too long for this moment, and the victory should be hers alone. The hero apologized, but said he had no right to lose, neither to himself nor to her. Rosa watched her friends from the infirmary and whispered that she believed in him to the end. Battle begins. Leah summoned the ancestor's power. Her revelation became even more intense. She attacked with the dragon's black breath, and the hero barely managed to dodge. Using his first sword, he parried her strikes. She used the dragon's black breath again. The weapon in his hand felt foreign to her. A crack appeared in her defenses. This was hardly the same Leah he had known. She was no longer carefree. They paused briefly. The hero admitted he felt powerless against her strength. She apologized, saying she could not let him take charge of the fight. She still had more to show and unleashed a powerful blast of energy. The hero saw the projectile was huge but slow, giving him a chance to dodge. It might not have been worth it. If he dies, that will not be the end. He can still move. She can still fight. Black smoke covered everything. The hero thought she had already decided that victory would be hers. She prepared the final blow, sure she had won. He repelled the attack, but barely. He neutralized the strike with the Lord's spears. Leah's training was clearly just as intense. She did not rely on talent like others did. Like the hero, she tried to push past the limit that had always held him back. The princess attacked again, shouting that she would win this time. In the heat of battle, the hero saw his reflection in the blade and did not recognize himself. His hair had gone white, and his expression had changed. Leah asked, worried whether he was all right. He said there was nothing frightening. It was just that his hair had turned white. She realized he had returned and might truly have become a monster. That was the point of their rivalry, so she awakened the dragon soul and attacked with renewed power. Leah announced the second round. The princess recalled her first training and sighed, feeling discouraged. Realizing the defeat was caused by her carelessness, she knew that more effort could have changed the result. Now she realized it was not carelessness. He had simply become stronger than she was ready to accept. It's time to say goodbye to the weaker version of herself and prove to everyone she can be his equal. She rushed forward, crying out. Her attacks were fierce, and the hero barely managed to parry them. He admitted he still had the strength advantage in the fight. She objected, saying there was no advantage if he still could not beat her. A powerful wave swept over the hero, but he broke through it. This move became the breaking point of his soul. At that moment, Leah released the dragon's soul. Seeing his surprise, she said it was the power of Fatimir. Black flames rushed in from 3 directions. Now he was no longer the same as before. He defended against the attack so skillfully that she was genuinely astonished. The hero simultaneously used 8 swords and white scales to create a new wave of pressure. Both needed rest after that. Leah realized she had used up too much energy. The hero felt tired too. His technique demanded enormous strength, and she asked if it was time for him to stop. He conceded that the power was too unstable. Leah proposed ending it here and now while they were both still standing. Energy burned through her, and she warned that the next strike would be an attack of will and resolve. The hero realized she was too close. Without changing his technique, he would burn alive. This time he was ready, stood steady and waited for his moment. He thanked her. Thanks to her, he could keep going and activated the 6 swords technique. He attacked with an explosive roar. She replied with a dragon's breath. In the heat of battle, the hero saw Leah fall. His chest tightened with fear. A flame flared up beside her. She cried that she was coming but had no strength left. Alan sped past, almost knocking her down, and the director shouted in shock at how fast he was going. A wall of fire raged before him. Instead of stopping, he ran toward it, pulled by the flames. His only goal was to stop him. However, it was all in vain. He could not stop the fire and began to understand. Only the greatest effort would give her a chance, and he gathered all his will for one last push.